Hello everybody, and a very warm welcome today to all our distinguished guests and speakers. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Laure Dutheillet. I'm the newly appointed director to SF, new and large department covering sustainable development, but also governance, economy, and public health. I am very delighted to welcome you today for this 2 days conference where we will be discussing SMEs going circular, decarbonization of food supply systems. We have prepared for you a program that is both informative and interactive. You will have the opportunity to listen to the input from our experts, as well as engage in the interactive discussions during thematic streams. We are delighted to welcome you on board, and we hope you will enjoy this 2 days conference with us. Without any further ado, I would like to pass the floor to Ambassador Toru Morikawa, the Executive Director of Asia-Europe Foundation, who gives us the direction on how we could follow the global agenda and connect dots among different United Nations meetings. Ambassador Morikawa, Your Excellencies, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Laure. Distinguished participants, greetings from Singapore. It is great pleasure that I welcome you to the Asia-Europe Environment Forum Annual Conference 2022. I would like to extend our deepest gratitude to our long-standing partners, Stockholm Environment Institute, Hans Seidel Foundation, SMEs Eco-Innovation Center, and Institute for Global Environmental Strategies. The Environment Forum will not be what it is today without your continued support. Distinguished participants, climate change is no longer an invisible threat that could be ignored. The intensity of climate extremes is rapidly increasing, with more than 50% of all countries exposed to 3 or 4 types of climate extremes from 2015 to 2020. This affects all dimensions of food security and adds pressure on the already fragile agri-food systems. However, the agri-food system is not just a victim of climate change. According to the recent analysis by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO, almost a third of human-caused greenhouse gases emissions comes from the world's agri-food systems in 2019. A study by McKinsey & Company underlines the importance of investing in sustainable agri-food systems, reforming agriculture practices. Just one part of the food supply chain already has the potential in reducing about 20% of total global emissions by 2050. With the food supply chain on course to overtake farming and land use as the largest emitter in many countries, the reforms ought not to be solely focused on agricultural practices. In 2019, pre- and post-production processes, which includes processes like production of materials for food packaging, energy generation and consumption for processing, transport and retail, and waste disposal, dominated more than half of the agri-food systems emissions in developed countries. On the other hand, in developing countries, farm-gate activities such as crop and livestock production, and land conversion processes dominated the emissions. Therefore, being a diverse region, decoupling agri-food industry and greenhouse gases emissions in the ASEM region requires a varied approach, which will be explored over these 2 days. This conference recognizes the vital role SMEs play in this transition, making up over 90% of all companies in the food sector. SMEs are well placed to innovate and pioneer sustainable practices, potentially sparkling a transformation of the agri-food industry. The outcomes of this 2-day conference will be shared as policy briefs for the better understanding of issues and practical solutions shared as good practice. The Asia Europe Foundation, along with partners of this conference, will endeavor to share the outcomes of this conference to global platforms such as the World Economic Forum. Therefore, I would like to invite all participants to actively participate and contribute during our interactive sessions, as well as take the opportunity to network with others. I wish you fruitful and insightful discussions over the 2 days. Thank you very much for your attention.
Ambassador Morikawa, Your Excellency, thank you so much for your insightful opening remarks. We will definitely take into account your suggestions and follow the path towards circularity and decarbonizing food supply system during this conference. Without any further comment, I would also like to now introduce Mr. O'Connor, Executive Director of the Stockholm Environment Institute, SEI Asia Center. Mr. O'Connor has been working with us, with Stockholm Environment Institute, and earlier with SIDA, the Swedish corporation, since over a decade. And Stockholm Environment Institute has been contributing significantly to our strategic direction, especially in the research area. Mr. O'Connor, the floor is yours.
Okay, Your Excellency, Mr. Toru Morikawa, Executive Director of the Asia Foundation, Mr. Michael Singler, the Regional Representative for the Hans Seidel Foundation, Mr. Yasuo Takahashi, Executive Director of IGES, and Ms. Hyun Ji, the Policy Team Leader for ASEC. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be here today to join you all at this meeting. Sorry I cannot be there in person. But we're here today to focus on some of the key issues of our day, which is food security, decarbonising the food supply chains, and looking at our own sustainability. And indeed, this is a lot to do in a short time, but it is indeed urgent. To transition to a circular economy centred on net zero can only happen if we all work together. So I want to thank the Asia Europe Foundation for organising the annual Environment Forum, of bringing us together and providing us the space to exchange our ideas and our solutions on decarbonising of the agri-food systems. SEI is an independent international research institute headquartered in Sweden, but with offices across Europe, Asia, Africa and the Americas. As a non-profit research institute, SEI acts as an honest broker, trying to look at transparent advice to decision makers to help them handle complex environment, development and social issues through objective scientific analysis. And so to today's topic. The current narratives of our food systems, which mainly focus on increased production, continues to lead towards resource depletion, and it contributes to approximately 1/3 of our greenhouse gas emissions. Most of the pollution from the agri-food systems and from livestock are due to land use changes, crop production approaches, and indeed the food supply chain itself. It's now estimated that food and green waste contributes up to 44% of global waste, affecting food supply chains by reducing food producers' incomes, causing price volatility, and limiting access to food itself. In addition, the war in Ukraine is sending shockwaves around the world, affecting global food security, already deteriorated by the past few years of COVID-19 pandemic. And as Ukraine and Russia provide nearly 30% of global wheat and barley, the war has already affected developing countries such as Indonesia, Philippines, Bangladesh and Egypt, making them more vulnerable to increased food prices and disrupted food value chains. So these transboundary impacts, whether from policy decision makers or from climate impacts themselves, continue to impact global food supply chains, especially when we fail to work together. So there's urgency in our need to decarbonise food systems and make them more sustainable and efficient. The Paris Agreement and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, particularly around no poverty and zero hunger, cannot be achieved without an urgent transformation to regenerative and equitable food systems that produce healthy, safe and nutritious food for everyone. With a projection that food production needs to increase up to 70% by 2050 to feed 9 billion people, it is now crucial and indeed urgent to redesign and transform the current food systems to be regenerative, to be circular and to be inclusive. The adoption of a circular economy in the agri-food context must be applied through various approaches, including through sustainable business models, preserving nutritional benefits in food, and mobilising investments in selected food chains, but also through fostering research and innovation in both the infrastructures and technology that are needed to support resource efficiency. And support and coordination from various stakeholders across all of these value chains are thus key to the success of closing the loop on food security. And while there are many solutions for decarbonising food supply chains, many businesses have not yet developed the capacity or full know-how to implement them. Many micro, small and medium enterprises have huge potential to drive green recovery through the creation of green jobs locally, providing basic needs and services for marginalised communities and in managing our natural resources, and we need to support them. Promoting food security by linking small-scale growers through climate-smart, local and diversified crop production to the processing opportunities and access to the markets will increase profitability for many of these farmers, thus increasing maybe sustainability. Policymakers and businesses need to provide platforms for Indigenous people, vulnerable groups, small-scale farmers and consumers to ensure that a diversity of solutions and circular economic models are explored and integrated into policy processes and best business practices. So with the momentum of green recovery, SEI is working with our partners to ensure these measures contribute to environmental sustainability and social inclusivity. And we hope that these will help build sustainable and economic prosperity for all, while mainstreaming human rights issues, gender equality and sustainable use of natural resources. So we hope that this forum serves as a platform where we can discuss and translate the discussions into clear action points. We must urgently shape the future of our food systems about how we both produce them and consume them. We call for stronger partnerships to fight the food insecurity without harming the planet. We want to acknowledge Indigenous people's food systems and how they can support and protect and preserve biodiversity. We want to acknowledge women's access and leadership in agriculture and agribusinesses. And finally, we want to accelerate the growth of small and medium enterprises to support this transformation to a more sustainable and circular food system. So lastly, I'd like to say thank you also to CEDA, who continue to support our work through the Strategic Collaborative Fund. And I wish everyone fruitful discussions where I hope we can be critical yet constructive in exploring these ideas and the ways forward, and help us set the policy agenda for all of us to support. And all of us here at SEI are looking forward to your ideas, collaboration and partnerships in the years to come ahead. So thank you very much indeed and enjoy the event.
Mr. O'Connor, thank you so much for your opening remarks. We strongly value the contribution which you, together with SEI, are bringing to our work. I would like to now invite you all to the opening remarks that will be delivered by Mr. Signa, resident representative of Hans Seidel Foundation. Hans Seidel Foundation has been the organization that worked with Asia Europe ENVforum22 and ESEF since its inception in 2003. It's one of the funding organizations that contribute to the idea and have a dialogue between Asia and Europe on environment and sustainable development. it is something of value as we can learn from each other. So let me welcome Mr. Signer. Mr. Signer, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Laura. Excellencies, distinguished participants and partners. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you, depending on where you are at the moment. I am very much delighted to have the opportunity to jointly open the first part of the annual conference of the Asia-Europe Environment Forum 2022. This is the third virtual ENVforum conference in a row. Yet we are confident that we will be able to meet in person again in a follow-up conference towards the end of the year. I hope that this virtual conference can set the stage for interesting discussions that we can then follow up on later this year in person. I would like to thank all of you for participating in this virtual conference, and I would like to specifically thank our colleagues and partners at the Asia-Europe Foundation and all other ENVforum consortium partners. The contributions and dedication by all of you made this conference possible. Before we start with this conference, I would also like to take the brief opportunity to introduce the Hans Seidel Foundation to those of you who have not worked with us before. The Hans Seidel Foundation is a German political foundation affiliated to the Christian Social Union based in Munich. We work in the service of democracy, peace, and development. This is the underlying motto for our activities in Germany, as well as for our projects abroad. In our work, we do not act on behalf of the German government, but we are mandated by the German Bundestag, our federal parliament. Thus, we have opportunities to act in ways that are largely independent of bilateral government development cooperation. Our international activities seek to promote sustainable development by following principles of self-help, subsidiarity, as well as democratic and inclusive decision-making processes. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the topic of this year's ENVforum could not be more timely and more relevant. Recent events have dramatically shown the vulnerability of our global food supply chains. Food security and food safety in this context represent, however, only one side of the coin. The other side relates to the environmental impact of our food supply chain. Some basic figures illustrate this enormous challenge. Today's food supply chain emits approximately 26% of human-caused greenhouse gas emissions. The agricultural system occupies 43% of arable land and is the cause of over 60% of all freshwater withdrawals. While producing food, we have contributed to environmental degradation and climate change, which in turn threatens our food security and our food safety. Yet, about 1/3 of food is wasted throughout the value chain. Despite the high proportion of wasted food, 1 out of 9 people on Earth still does not have enough food to eat. This is the challenging context that has been aggravated by multiple global crises. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused enormous challenges for global supply chains. The consequences of Russia's war in Ukraine have a dramatic impact on our global food and energy security. Political stability in various parts of the world is being threatened by those developments. These challenges again underline the urgent need to find ways to make our food value chain more efficient, more resilient, and circular. With SMEs representing roughly 90% of all producers, processors, and distributors of food and beverages, their role in closing the biological and material loop in the food supply chain is crucial. SMEs have advantages such as flexibility, responsiveness to market needs, and incentives for innovation. SMEs can further contribute to redesign the food system by ensuring a circular transformation, undertaking sustainable production practices, and delivering sustainable solutions for consumers. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, I am very happy to see as many of you here today to discuss how to enable SMEs to take an active role in circularizing and decarbonizing the food supply chain. I hope that with your active participation, we will have productive discussions on structural solutions for our food system. I wish you all an inspiring virtual conference. Thank you very much.
Mr. Signer, thank you so much for your relevant opening remarks. We always appreciate the support of the Hans Seidel Foundation. And we also hope that our next conference will happen on site. Yeah. So next, I would like to invite Mr. Takahashi, the Executive Director of Institute of Global Environmental Strategy, IGES, to give us his opening remarks. IGES is one of the founding partners of Asia-Europe Environment Forum. Mr. Takahashi served in the ministry, including as Director of Climate Policy Division and Director General of Headquarters for Environmental Restoration of Fukushima, Director General of Environmental Management Bureau, and Vice Minister for Global Environment Affairs. Mr. Takahashi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for a kind introduction. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and good morning. It is my great pleasure to attend the 2022 ENV Forum with you today. First, I would like to congratulate ASF, the Stockholm Environment Institute, Hans Seidel Foundation, and SME Eco Innovation Center for successfully organizing this forum today. As the representative of IGES, one of the partner organizations of the ENV Forum, I'm very happy to continue our cooperation. This year's theme was set as SMEs Going Circular, Decarbonization of Food Supply Chains. Building on the previous ENV Forum conferences that have taken sustainable consumption and production, food safety, and food transitions, this year's forum pays special attention to the role of SMEs and how they are supported. SMEs occupy an essential role in the society and economy. In Asian countries, they provide 97% of employment opportunities. They also occupy a crucial position in providing daily products and services such as food to consumers in the production area and the region, using the resources of the local community. Therefore, the transformation of SMEs production and management into circular models will be vital for creating more sustainable patterns of meeting the day-to-day needs of Asian societies. Additionally, SMEs are often not bound by existing business models and can think flexibly about new businesses. Thus, they can often introduce innovative models of service provision, which eventually spread throughout societies. Such possibilities of innovations starting from SMEs are even more evident in the era of digital transformation. I expect that we can discuss the potential of SMEs to contribute to decarbonization by taking the best advantage of digitalization. I would like to mention the importance of changing the service provisions. The recent IPCC Working Group 3 report, released in April this year, showed that demand-side measures could reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 40 to 70%. The report emphasized that individual consumers' behavior change are insufficient to realize this reduction potential and that we must restructure the service provision system by reforming societal cultures, business models, and investment policies and infrastructures. The support of SMEs is a crucial element in this restructuring of the service provision systems. The IPCC report also asserts that for successful demand-side mitigation, it is essential that women, youth, and minorities can participate in the economy and decision-making processes. In this context, it is desired that the societal support for SMEs be designed to ensure these people's empowerment. Let me introduce one case where IGES cooperates with SMEs towards sustainable living. IGES have conducted public dialogues and household experiments in cities in Japan, India, Thailand, and other countries toward bringing decarbonized lifestyles into households. We believe that in transforming citizens' lifestyles, it is essential to change the service provider system at the local levels. Therefore, we are preparing a living lab approach in collaboration with SMEs in some of these cities. I would expect this forum to be an opportunity for countries in Asia and Europe to share ways to support SMEs to utilize new technologies and lead the transformation to a decarbonized and circular economy while empowering all people. Finally, let me introduce our annual conference. IGES will organize the 14th International Forum on Sustainable Asia and the Pacific, or ISAP 2022, on 28th of November this year. It will discuss ways to strengthen a more integrated approach to address the two significant global challenges, biodiversity and climate change. I would like to invite you to join us at the ISAP in November if you are interested. Again, I'm looking forward to hearing a lively discussion during the ENV forum today and tomorrow. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Takahashi. Thank you very much for your opening remarks. Your dedication is really essential for us and for our SDGs. I'm now delighted to introduce Madame G, the policy team leader of the SMEs Eco Innovation Center, ASEIC, to give us her opening remarks. So ASEIC has partnership with Asia-Europe Environment Forum since 2003. It acts as an international cooperation platform for the SMEs eco-innovation, contributing to advancing the sustainable and climate resilient development in ASEM countries. So Mrs. G focuses on organizational development, strategic planning, policy research, analysis and advisory, and international project management. Mrs. G, Madam G, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much for introduction, and thank you. Greetings to all partners of the ENV Forum and participants. Personally, it's first time for me to attend this ENV Forum. As a partner to the ENV Forum, ASEM, SMEs Eco Innovation Center, ASEIC in short. Sorry for the long name, but we are very pleased to jointly welcome all of the participants to this annual conference. Speaking as an acting Secretary General of the ASEIC, I'm excited to see that the conference this year will focus on such issues related to how to enable SMEs transition towards decarbonization, making food supply chains sustainable. As the organization's name speaks for itself, ASEIC facilitates eco-innovation of SMEs and startups in Asia-Europe meeting countries. Eco-innovation is correlated with those concepts of sustainable and climate-resilient development, green growth, and a circular economy. To those who might ask questions about why we talk of SMEs in the ENV Forum, I want to brief you on the SME connection with sustainable development. I might repeat what was addressed by other partners, Mr. Takahashi of IGS and other partners, but I want to draw your attention to the role of SMEs. As a co-driver of innovation and growth, the roles of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, MSMEs, we call it, are critical to leading to the decarbonization of industry and business practices. Actually, yesterday, the 27th of June was the United Nations designated MSME Day, which was marked to raise awareness of the tremendous contributions of MSMEs to the achievement of SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. MSMEs, as you know, account for 90% of businesses and 60 to 70% of employment and 50% of GDP worldwide. Whereas MSMEs take up the majority share of businesses' employment worldwide, including Asia and Europe region, their contribution to GDP and exports seems to be less noticeable. In comparison to large firms, MSMEs are more likely to be resource and capacity constrained to move forward with the green and digital transitions we are talking today. So this year's ENVforum annual conference is organized online for today and tomorrow, as we know. And a spin-off conference is scheduled to be held in October, face-to-face in Korea, while the date and key topics would be confirmed and shared in due time. The broad theme could be around the environment and SME nexus, and especially clean transition of sustainability and digitalization in the food industry. It might provide us an opportunity to look at the key issues identified during the last year's conference under a session on the role of SMEs and circular food production. Those key issues were, if I may remind of you, the need for more coherent policies, diversification of and access to financing, and awareness raising for both the business community and the general public. I expect that this online conference this time provides a useful avenue to discuss the key issues on innovation required for decarbonization pathways led by SMEs. Thank you very much for listening and enjoy the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam G, for your remarks. Your insight bring us more in depth about the SME circularity. So I would invite everybody to move to the next session. And I would thank you all the partners and speakers for the opening remarks, and welcome everybody to this session dedicated to the ENVforum. would like to welcome you to this session dedicated to the Environment Forum. So please allow me to tell you a bit more and in 4 points about the Environment Forum. So I would like to share with you the first slide. So as I already said, so I would like to tell you a bit more and in 4 points about the Environment Forum and about its involvement into the 2030 agenda implementation. So in this brief presentation, I will firstly introduce the Asia-Europe Environment Forum. Secondly, I will tell you about the environmental impacts of agri-food industry. Thirdly, I will tell you more about the Environment Forum Annual Conference 2021. And in the fourth point, I will make the link with the Annual Conference 2022. Next, please. So first, let me give you a brief introduction on SF Environment Forum. It was established in 2003. It was a partnership between Asia-Europe Environment, the Asia-Europe Environment Forum is a partnership between Asia-Europe Foundation, so the SF, the Hans Seidel Foundation, the SMEs Eco-Innovation Center, the Institute for Global Environmental Strategy, and the Government of Sweden through the Strategic Collaborative Fund administrated by Stockholm Environment Institute. Next, please. The Environment Forum aims to contribute to the formulation of sound decision across all sectors that are mindful of their environmental, social, and economic impacts and of the future generations. In doing so, we foster inter-regional cooperation between Asia and Europe on areas of sustainable development and climate change. ENVforum is based on 3 pillars. First, we undertake research on SDGs, including on climate change-related issues. Second, we organize knowledge hub meetings of relevant expert representatives from the civil society, the governance, and the private sectors. And third, we disseminate outcomes of consultation to relevant actors. Next, please. Moving on to this conference thematic concern, as already mentioned by Ambassador Morikawa in his welcome remarks previously, the agri-food industry is responsible for 1/3 of human-caused greenhouse gases emission globally. In order to limit the planet's warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, one of the more obvious strategies would be to reduce the carbon footprint of the industry at every stage of the food supply chain. This presents the agri-food industry an opportunity to contribute towards preserving the environment and mitigating the climate crisis. Next, please. So last year's conference focused on circular food system as possible solution to reverse climate change. The conference was designating to promote exchanges on regional and international levels and to highlight the range of multi-stakeholder initiatives or partnership promoting the adoption of sustainable consumption and production practice in food system. Last year's conference is explored 4 thematic streams: agriculture, SMEs and food circularity, food security in times of pandemic, and international food trade, culminating in 4 policy briefs covering challenges and potential solutions for each thematic area. Next, please. Based on last year's outcomes, this year, we have decided to focus on SMEs as an important impetus for the decarbonization of the agri-food industry. With over 90% of all companies in the industry being SMEs, they play an important role in innovating in the food sector and are well placed to pioneer and deliver solutions in the sector. That being said, enabling solutions such as improved legislation and financing, access to technologies, and more need to be present to support the transformation of the sector. Next, please. Our conference this year aims to boost the exchange of ideas and solutions on the decarbonization of the agri-food industry, focusing on SMEs. As the transition to a circular economy centered on net zero can only be achieved by scaling up collaboration and partnerships among stakeholders involved in the SMEs ecosystem, the conference offers a platform to empower participants to identify challenges, exchange best practices, and brainstorm solutions towards an effective decarbonization of food supply chains. This is key to stimulate progress towards achieving a sustainable future. Later today, we will be exploring two thematic streams. Streams 1's objectives are to identify and analyze the enabling factors and strategies for the transition to decarbonize and transition to a circular business model. Stream 2, on the other hand, will explore the multifaceted role of SMEs and challenge the one-size-fits-all narrative that tends to emerge in the climate agenda. Next, please. Okay, so tomorrow, other than presenting and discussing the conference outcomes, you will also have the opportunity to meet innovators in the industry. Before I end my presentation, I would like to strongly encourage all of you to use the interactive features to be actively involved into the discussions and to connect with people from all over the globe. Thank you very much. So, yeah, sure. So now I would like to introduce and to welcome Mr. Voutier, Senior Advisor at Grow Asia. Mr. Voutier supports the innovation lead, bringing together business, government, and NGO leaders who share a commitment to using new innovations to make smallholder value chain more productive and sustainable. I would also like to introduce Dr. Kotsieme, the research program manager of HOT and our Cool Institute. HOT or Cool is a public interest think tank that explores the intersection between society and sustainability. Dr. Kotsieme was a fellow of the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IPBS, and he's a member of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance and was awarded a Marie Curie Scholarship at Trinity College Dublin and the European Environment Agency. So, Mr. Voutier and Dr. Kotsieme, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having us. Thank you for the opening remarks and the kind introduction. Luca and I, over the last month or so, have had the opportunity to prepare the background paper for the event over the next 2 days. And it's been a really interesting exercise to tap into the food system across Asia and across Europe and really understand what's driving emissions from the sector and explore some of the solutions. And I think The question is a really interesting one, because when we talk about the climate, we often talk about policy, or we talk about the actions of large companies. But it's rare and quite a privileged position to talk about the role of smaller firms who are often overlooked. If we can move to the next slide, please. The approach that Luca and I took was to begin by looking at what are the leading causes of emissions. Many of the opening remarks referred to a statistic of 33% or a third of global emissions coming from food systems. But what are those emissions? What drives them? And we believe that if we know what the emissions look like, that's the beginning of finding solutions. Luca will then talk about the mitigation strategies. And what we've done is identify 4 leading mitigation strategies, solutions that are realistic, economic, and feasible to reduce emissions from the agri-food sector in Assam. Finally, we're going to look at who are the SMEs. So when we talk about 90% of the businesses in the food sector being small and medium businesses, who are they? What are they interested in? What are their incentives? And how can we ensure that they are agents and active in mitigation? The next slide, please. So let's frame the discussion a little bit to begin. So when we talk about the food system, as Laura said, we're talking about the full chain from the farm right through the logistics and supply of food, the retailing, the consumption, and the disposal of waste. We're talking about right across the value chain of the food that we eat. As I said before, and many of the speakers have already noted, the food system is a leading cause of emissions globally. And about 35% of those emissions come from Asia. That is a mistake on the slide, and 9% come from Europe, the 2 regions that we're concerned about for the purposes of today's report. As some of the opening speakers also said, the food system is not just a cause of climate change, it's also threatened by climate change. And in Europe, that means we're going to start to see particularly drier climate in the south of Europe, and across Asia, we'll see a change in the pests and diseases that we have within the agricultural system, and we're going to see declining yields. If we want to understand the European system and the Asian system, it's helpful to understand how dominant livestock is across the European system. That includes dairy as well as meat. And of course, as you can imagine, rice is the largest crop in Asia, and it means that the 2 regions have very different cropping systems and very different modes of emissions. As you might also be aware, farms in Asia are very small, typically under 1 hectare, while in the average farm in Europe is over 10 hectares. And that really changes the dynamics of emissions, and it changes the dynamics of what we can expect to see in terms of mitigation. SMEs have a critical role across Asia and across Europe in the food system. And we believe that's because of the fragmentation of these food systems. Farms are typically very remotely located. Production and consumption occur over very large areas, and lots of businesses are involved in bringing food to our plates. So it really is the preserve of smaller companies rather than larger ones. If we want to move on to the next slide, we can talk a little bit about what these emissions are. As I said, we really want to understand, just onto the next slide, please. If we want to understand what we can do about emissions, we need to understand where they're coming from. So let's take Europe to start with. These green boxes represent the relative portion of emissions from different parts of the food system in Europe. As you can see, the largest emissions come from soils. Soils naturally emit carbon as part of the natural process within soils, but many of the things that we do on farms drive up carbon emissions from soils. So the use of fertilizers, the use of manure, the turning over and tilling of soils all lead to the emission of higher levels of greenhouse gases. The second largest, and very similar in size to emissions from soils, are emissions from food waste. Food degrades once we throw it away, once we put it into landfill. it degrades and releases methane and other causes of emission. So there you have it. We have the two largest causes of emissions from the food system in Europe. And this is really where we need to start when we're starting to think about how do we solve the challenge of emissions. We need to look at these large leading causes of emissions. Smaller emissions come from fermentation within the gut of animals, particularly cows, as we're all aware, from manure, again within the realms of animal production. And finally, we have some energy use within the transport of foods as well as on farm through things like pumps and tractors, and heating of greenhouses is particularly important in Europe when it comes to on-farm energy consumption. So if we move to the next slide, we can start to unpack the comparison between the two regions that we want to understand today. We can talk about the differences between Europe and Asia. As you can see, when we introduced the map for Asia, we introduced two new categories of emissions. One of those is burning, and particularly the burning of crop residues, as well as savanna land for the purposes of expanding agricultural production. And we also see rice appear. Rice production in Europe is negligible, but as I said in the introduction, it's the largest crop in Asia and a leading cause of emissions, particularly flooded rice. When rice is immersed in water and part of the growing process, methane is emitted as part of the chemical process when the rice plant is sitting in water. So you can see some commonalities between the regions. We can see that both soils and waste are the dominant causes of emissions in both regions. And we have a mix of different smaller causes of emissions. There are two flaws in this diagram, and I want to explore both of them. One is that the population in Asia is much bigger than Europe. So in fairness, we should actually draw the Asian diagram about 3 or 4 times bigger than the European diagram. And that's important to our discussion today, because if we are to deal with global emissions, we really do need to concentrate on Asia. In fairness, though, the emissions per capita in Europe are higher than in Asia. As you can see on the left there, emissions per capita in Europe are over 2 tons per person, and in Asia, under 2 tons. So there's a fairly significant difference per capita, and perhaps that creates a particularly strong moral argument for citizens in Europe to reduce their emissions. As they do, they are large on a per capita basis. So what can we learn from all this? This is the data. This is where the emissions are coming from. If we can go to the next slide, we can start to explore what we can learn. So, as I said, we need to think about what are the leading causes of emissions. It's much easier to have a net impact on global emissions by dealing with larger causes rather than small ones. So over the next couple of days, I would encourage you to take emissions from soils and emissions from waste very seriously in your discussions, because they do drive between them almost half of the emissions from the ASEAN food system. If we can move on to the next one, please. We move on to the next slide. Oh, fantastic. So it's helpful to understand the difference between emissions that occur on farm and emissions that occur off farm, because if we're going to talk about the role of SMEs, are we talking about SMEs that are on the farm end of the food system, or are we talking about the waste and the consumer end of the system? You can see here that the vast bulk of emissions from the food sector happen on farm. About 71% of the emissions from the food sector occur on farm. Now, the tricky bit here is that many of the farm emissions are actually driven by consumer decisions. So if you look at the animal emissions here from manure and from fermentation in the gut of animals, while they do occur on farm, they are in fact driven by consumer preference for meat. Nonetheless, in thinking about the role of SMEs, we do really need to consider the fact that the vast bulk of emissions do occur on farm. And that's perhaps where we're going to find many of our solutions for mitigation. And over the next couple of days, again, I encourage you to think about particularly the role of on-farm emissions. If we can move to the next slide. As I alluded to, many of the emissions are driven by consumer decisions, and particularly by consumers choosing to eat meat and dairy products. In Europe, emissions per capita are double what they are in Asia. But the sad truth is that Asia is fast catching up. We are seeing rising meat consumption in Asia year on year, and we are seeing a switch in Asian diets away from rice and towards meat. You'll see a half-shaded box in there for soils, and that represents the reality that 72% of the agricultural land in Europe is used to grow crops for meat. So, for animals. So, on top of the emission from the animals themselves and from manure, many of those soil emissions have their origin in the production of feed for animals. This slide, I think, is a real challenge for Europe, and I think something to really think about for those guests and attendees here today who are from Europe. If we can move on to the next slide, please. The next thing that we thought it would be helpful to do would be to look at the role of on-farm decisions. What sort of decisions are farmers making that are driving up emissions? In Asia, that comes from burning, and as I said before, that's burning of crop residues from rice. It comes from burning savanna. It comes from growing rice in a flooded fashion. There is an alternative. We can grow dry-seeded rice in Asia. And it comes from decisions around energy by farmers in Europe. If we can move on to the next slide, please. Finally, I think a really important question when we ask about mitigation is the economic one. It's all very well to say that we have a theoretical emission reduction of Y or Z, but theoretical emission reductions are only theoretical. We really do need to think about where are the economic reductions, where are the reductions where the person that drives that emission will benefit from a reduction. So if I choose to throw away less of the food that I buy from the supermarket or the retailer, I benefit because I save money. And if I choose to eat less meat, which is typically a more expensive food, I can save money by switching to a vegetarian diet. Farmers can grow more crops by avoiding burning and using their crop residue to fertilize their crops. These are all examples of emissions, classes of emissions, where the cause of the emission, the person generating the emission, stands to benefit from reducing it. And that's something that I think we really need to keep in mind as we consider the role of SMEs in emission reduction, is where are the economic opportunities? And many economists will say, at what carbon price is this emission able to be reduced? Another really good question. At a $10 price, at a $40 price, at a $100 price, can we address this emission? And that's an excellent question. We can move on to the next slide. So now I'm going to pass over to Luca, who's going to talk about what we can actually do about all of this. Perhaps I've painted a bit of a sad story about the emissions that come from our food system. I hope Luca can give you a little bit of hope and talk about what are the 4 most promising strategies to reduce emissions from the food system in ASEAN. Thanks, Luca.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Lore. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the mitigation pathways. And first of all, something that I wish all of the participants would keep in their minds in the discussion in these 2 days is about kind of the systemic nature of the changes that we need. So I was very happy to see, Lore, your slide on the agri-food system, which really shows that it goes from the very first stages of production until consumers. So to decarbonize this system, we need that this goal of decarbonization is shared by all of the actors along the value chain or within this system. So from producers to any sort of business within the system to consumers. And of course, SMEs play an important role there, as well as policymakers. As Paul noted, a big problem to solve in decarbonization is related to the high carbon footprint of production and consumption of meat, particularly in Europe. So this is really something for which there would be a demand and also a need for important reductions. especially in high-income countries, and especially in the context of international climate targets, such as the ones of the Paris Agreement, for example. This means that there are opportunities and also demand for developing meat alternatives, and this is something that could be like part of mitigation pathways, and that could involve SMEs. As we also seen, a lot of emission come from the soil, and there is a high mitigation potential from capturing carbon in the soil. This could be done, for example, by a number of practices within the regenerative agriculture, such as, for example, switching to no-till agriculture, using fertilizer more efficiently, and others. And in particular, fertilizers, as always during a crisis, as the one we are facing with the war in Ukraine, there are opportunities that are presented, and here in fertilizers is really one example of that, as prices are rising very much, and we know that we will have shortages in supply soon. So there's really a time for SMEs and other business to develop alternative to fertilizers, or like even offering services for using more natural fertilizers as compost or manure. SMEs then, to just focus a bit more on this particular group or these particular actors, are really ideal for testing different solutions, and they can be examples for showcasing best practices and innovation that can then be scaled up broader. Can we go to the next slide, please? I'm also aware of time, so I'm going to be a bit fast. Here we have the 4 main strategies that we identified in our research as mitigation pathways. In particular, the one on the left are most relevant in Europe, the one on the right also more relevant in Asia, but I would say that 4 are really important for the whole region. Food loss and food waste is very important. It's a major cause of emissions, and also reducing food loss and food waste would allow to reduce emissions or avoid emissions from different stages of the system, because we would avoid emission from food loss in production, in consumption, and also emission from food waste management. So it's really a winning condition along different stages of the system. We need to reduce the consumption of meat, and this, of course, is very important, and is dependent on also developing alternatives that are feasible and that are accepted by consumers. Increased soil carbon, I've already talked about regenerative agriculture, and then could include practices such as diverse crop rotation, animal integration, and agroforestry, which could also improve other environmental performance of the agri-food system. For example, in Europe, there is a lot of concern about declining biodiversity connected to agriculture and food production. So this regenerative agriculture can really generate lots of co-benefits, both in environmental terms and in terms of human health as well. And we have to shift some farm practices, in particular, also burning of residues in Asia, and other practices that we know are emitting or damaging the soil, for example, and hampering the capacity of ecosystems to absorb carbon. These are kind of the main things. I will now pass again over to Paul to go through some example of SMEs.
Thank you very much, Luca. So we've asked the question, where are the emissions coming from? And I hope that we've broken the causes of emissions down into some bite-sized chunks that you can deal with over the next couple of days, and a bit of a framework for the types of emissions that are coming from the sector and the mitigation opportunities. But now I want to do the same thing with the small and medium businesses in the agri-food system. We can't refer to them all as simply small and medium businesses. That's a too big a group. When you're talking about 90% of the businesses in the system, we need a framework to break these small businesses down and really understand who they are and how they can become agents for decarbonisation. So if we move on to the first slide, I want to talk about the traditional SME. So in Asia, a traditional SME might be a retailer, like you see in this photo, sorry, a trader, like you see in this photo, moving crops from farm into a city to be sold at a wet market or at a supermarket. If we go to the next slide, in Europe, a traditional SME might include a retailer who's selling fertilizer to multiple different farmers. And when we think about a traditional SME, what we're thinking about, for me, is we're thinking about a reactive business. We're thinking about a business that's probably been around for quite a while, and it's a business that's going to react to the incentives that we put in place. If the policy changes and there's a price on carbon, they might sell less fertilizer and they might sell more manure. These are relatively traditional and reactive businesses. And they have a role in decarbonisation because if we put the right incentives in place, they will react and change their behaviour. However, I want to talk about two other sorts of SMEs because I think they actually have a more important role in the decarbonisation process. If we go to the next slide, I want to talk about the service SME. When I talk about a service SME, we're talking about a small business that goes around from farm to farm and provides a service. In this picture here, we might imagine an agronomist in Europe going around from farm to farm and providing advice to farmers. On the next slide, we might be looking at a soil testing lab in India, which provides soil testing results for farmers. When we're thinking about decarbonisation strategies, I think we have to put service SMEs at the real centre of our thinking. Service SMEs have two things. They have trust and they have scale. If we want to really change things across the food system in Asia, the food system in Europe, we need service SMEs because they have the reach across multiple farms. And as we said in the introduction, a large amount of the emissions from the sector come from farms. But service SMEs don't just have scale, they have trust. If you go to a farmer and you say, what changes your behavior? What changes what you do? They will often say an agronomist, a retailer, somebody that I trust who works with other farmers, provides advice and changes the way I do business. And I really, over the next couple of days, want to encourage you to have a think about the exciting and really interesting role that service SMEs are going to have in decarbonising the sector. Moving to the next slide, I also think we have a really interesting role in decarbonisation for what we might call innovator SMEs. Innovator SMEs exist to do something new. They are the opposite of a traditional SMEs. They exist to change. They exist to push new technologies into a sector. And boy, do we need innovator SMEs if we're going to decarbonise. We need innovator SMEs in waste. We need innovator SMEs in no-till. We need innovator SMEs in manure treatment. We need new technologies. We need them to scale. This is a digital technology. This image illustrates digital technology in Indonesia called Cultiva, which helps connect farmers through to markets. If we move on to the next slide, this is an innovator SME that's capturing the larvae from flies and using that to create high protein foods that are low in carbon emissions. We need innovation SMEs to develop new technologies, but we also need service SMEs to take those innovations to scale and to use their scale and use their trust to take these innovations to farmers. We go to the next slide. The exciting thing for innovation SMEs and the exciting thing for service SMEs is the offset market. And I'm really optimistic about what the offset market is going to do over the next 10 years. If you look at the commitments that are coming out from large corporates, from consumers around wanting to offset their emissions, the offset market will scale. Innovator SMEs and service SMEs are well positioned to tap into the offset market and take low emissions technologies to farms. We think finance is the missing ingredient. We think finance up front to finance new innovations and finance service SMEs to tap into that offset market is something that's really exciting, and we encourage you to think about the role of finance and the role of offsets over the next 2 days. We move to the final slide, just onto the last slide. I wanted to offer you 5 event primers, 5 things that we want to give you to have a discussion about and consider. I want to leave you with these 4 emission strategies, and maybe you don't agree. Maybe you think one of those shouldn't be in the top 4. Maybe you think something else should be. Please have that discussion. Write to us, challenge us, have that discussion with one another. We think SMEs have a really important role, and we think that's really linked in with the offset market. And finally, we wanted to stress, we believe, the importance of finance, and finance particularly for the service and innovation SMEs. Again, thank you for the opportunity to put the paper together. I'd encourage you to read the background paper. I found it really interesting. And even at a personal level, it's changing the decisions that I make around what I eat and how I dispose of food. So it's been a really interesting topic, and I hope that you find these slides helpful in framing the discussion over the next 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. My name is Grażyna Pławska, and I'm also working in the department headed by Laura in Asia Europe Foundation. For the benefit of time, we decided to keep the Q&A on Huva, because I saw some of the speakers already started to answer all the questions we had from participants. And then during the presentation, Paul and Luca also tried to touch upon the issues that you have brought up. So this was something that we would like to also encourage, that we can have a dialogue on the platform itself. And also what is the advantages by using such an interactive platform is the opportunity for participants to also contribute to the discussion. So this is something we are very glad to see, and would like to see more. We will have both Paul and Luca with us for a couple of more minutes to make sure that we address all the issues you have raised. I just wanted to highlight, though, that we are not experts on everything. I could see that some of the questions were quite specialized. So please keep in mind that we can collectively address some of the issues, but for some of the things, there are also partly philosophical. For example, what to do to address Agenda 2030 overall and environmental goals, given the ongoing situation and climate crisis, among others. So if it was so easy to answer, like after the conference, all the questions are answered and we know what to do and the problems are solved, that would be wonderful. But I think there is still time left for such a conference to happen. However, we are really hoping that we are contributing, at least in our small group, to make sure that the efforts related with SMEs and agri-food and related challenges are addressed. So thank you so much. Thank you, Luca, and thank you, Paul. We are very grateful for your contribution. My colleagues will share the background paper. We will be sharing it both on Huva and also on our platform and on our project page. Please kindly note that we will also upload all the presentations, and the recording of this session will be available for you later on. So this is something that we also encourage you to do. And please stay with us for the next session, because we will be moving slowly to the thematic streams. And then closing, therefore, the introduction and opening plenary that give us all the overview of what is happening with agri-food sector and SMEs. Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. My name is Grażyna Pławska, and I am working for Asia Europe Foundation, and I'm responsible for the Sustainable Development thematic area. And I would like to warmly invite you to join us for the stream 1 that is looking into SMEs decarbonization enablers. So what we have prepared for you in this stream is a group of experts that will guide us through what is possible, what is already in place, and what is their experience related to looking at the enabling conditions and mechanisms and policies, if applicable, that are helping companies to transition towards circular economy and are contributing to the ecosystem that is supporting the circular transitions. And having said that, I would like to kindly invite you to welcome first speaker, Madame Naris Chakir. She is managing the AIT Food Rising Food Stars program, a network of over 50 early, ambitious and impactful scale-ups in the agtech and food tech spaces. She believes in the importance of the connections, creating opportunities and facilitating collaboration between different stakeholders. Dear Naris, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending where you're joining from. Thank you, Pratina, for having me today and to give me the opportunity to speak about what we're doing at EIT Food to enable the decarbonization of food supply chains. So if I may ask you to start sharing the slides. Thank you. So just to explain to everyone what is EIT Food. So EIT is the European Institute for Innovation and Technology. It's a pan-European institution that is co-founded by the EU. And we operate across Europe to support the ecosystem of innovation in the agri-food business. Next slide, please. We are the biggest innovation ecosystem actually worldwide, and we believe in the power of creating ecosystems to work towards making the future of food more sustainable, healthy, and trusted. In our consortium, we have more than 200 partners, from big corporates to research institutes and universities, and as well startups and investors in our pipeline. Next slide, please. So in terms of how we look at impact, we look at it from two perspectives. First one is in terms of economic and social impact that we're trying to have as an organism by creating new ventures every year, creating new jobs, and attracting investments to the startups that we work with, so they can go and create more opportunities in our markets. And in terms of societal impact, we work across 6 focus areas that I'm mentioning here that are all connected to the UN SDGs and the EU Green Deal. So these areas are going from protein diversification to sustainable aquaculture to sustainable agriculture. Circularity of food system is also one of them, and this is really the DNA, and we only operate across these impact areas. Next slide, please. We have 3 programs in our entrepreneurship side of the business, where we support startups across different stages. So the seedbed, for example, which is our launch program, is really for aspiring entrepreneurs that are starting a concept or idea. So we support them into turning it into a business model and viable prototype. The Accelerate is our food accelerator network, which is for incorporated startups that are looking to test their prototype or MVP in market condition, and we focus on connecting them with our network of corporate. And I myself take care of the scale-up related program called the Rising Food Stars, where we support scale-ups that already have a validation in the market with impactful technologies. We're really important for us to look at impact and technology, and that are ready to scale at an international level. Next slide, please. So we know across the globe that it's very hard to scale, and many barriers come at this stage. And if you look at the European landscape, this is a data from Crunchbase specifically for food and agri ventures. We know that less than 40% of the startups are able to scale beyond 11 employees, which is already very challenging. But again, to move from this step to having above 50 employees and reach this level of scale, only 12% manage to the next level. It is difficult because it requires a very specific type of support, a shift of mindset, a shift of culture, having the right people on board, having the right go-to-market strategy, having the right financing support also to get to the next stage. And this is why, if you move to the next slide, please, what we know is that having this support system or being backed up by an external structure actually increases the chance of success for startup by twice. And we've seen it in our numbers. So, for example, in our scale up, the success stories that we see based on the type of support that we give them in terms of connections with corporate investors and to R&D centers as well, help them to go to the next level at a much faster pace. Next slide, please. And that's exactly why we exist as Rising Food Stars, because we know that companies that are really at this stage, as this turnaround or transformational phase to move from being a startup to being a scale up ready to transform, requires a shift, a radical shift that is not easy to support, and especially when you have founders that come from a technological background or R&D and needs to move into more focus on delighting customers or thinking about their structure and processes, their hiring strategy, the scalability of the business model. It requires a new set of skills that need to come and complement what they are doing if they want to scale their impactful solution. And here, I mean, impactful solutions could come in many forms, as I explained in the beginning. And what we provide as a Rising Food Stars, if you move to the next step, next slide, please, is really to help them on scaling their impact in a profitable way, because we really believe that impact without profitability is not sustainable. And we want to make sure that the sense and DNA of the impact is there in their mission, in their vision, in their KPIs, in their business model, that it's integrated so that the profitability is also a natural outcome of what they are doing. And we help them to do so by giving them actually four main pillars. The first one that we found out is really key. I think when Christina asked me about the enablers, I would really think that for scale-ups in particular, access to talent is really important. So what I mean by talent here is either internal talent, so from a hiring, the new C-suite that is required for this particular stage, the management team, making sure that we help them on the organization of their board so that they have the right people also to guide them, into as well having access to experts and advisors that are tailored to their needs for this particular stage. Then the second pillar is about access to market, and we do so through our corporate venturing arm, where we help them to connect with the right corporates so that they can bring to life their solutions in a more commercial viable way and get support on the go-to markets, especially that most of our companies are in a B2B model. But we also help them to open up to other markets like US or Asia. And that's why this forum is very important, because we would like to trigger more and more this type of connections also outside of Europe, if we're thinking about scaling impact beyond Europe. The third pillar, and I think someone who was presenting before me was mentioning the access to finance or access to funding if you want to grow up. And I think what is interesting is also to have new model of financing that are taking risk with the company as well, but also benefiting from their success, so we can reinvest in other ones. So we operate in new models like revenue-based, or we invest ourselves as EIT Food with the SAFE model. So we're in this way, we are also empowering them and also taking risk, the necessary risk with them, especially at commercialization stage. And last but not least, to close the loop, we need to give this type of scale-up access to recognition and access to visibility. And PR is important here to talk about success stories related to impact, so we can attract more companies and we can support more companies, and we can start talking about the importance of impact in this journey of decarbonization, for example. Next slide, please. So in a snapshot in terms of results, let's say for 2021, and I think that's really interesting. We had 17 members in the cohort of 2021 from diverse countries across Europe, and we were able to attract more than 350 million of both public and private investment, and create more than 650 jobs only by those scale-up. Among those, we had more than 8 success stories that are having a lot of recognition across Europe, and a reconfirmation that impact can go hand in hand with profitability, with generating revenues and having also a financial impact. And among those members, we see also a good increase in terms of representation of women or in CEOs and senior leadership position. Next slide, please. For 2022, these are the new rising food stars that join us. We have almost 46 companies across the 6 focus areas I mentioned. And we try to have a representation across all these particular areas because we really believe that the decarbonization or the sense of impact and sustainability can come across the supply chain and across different areas. And we need to be pushing for this type of contribution. From protein diversification to having more circular systems, to having the right tools to trace their stability and ensure that we also have a certain tracking of how the decarbonization is happening. And just to conclude, I know I'm almost at the end of it. I want just to share this success story and one example that we had from last year, which is about Redefine Meat, that is an Israeli company that was part of our cohort in the past few years. They are specialized in 3D printing made out of plant-based and making sure that the outcome is basically to have the right flavor and texture of meat, and we all know how what is the impact of beef in general on the environment and on the planet, and how the solutions can be really important for our future. So how did we support them? So they joined us in 2018, and they joined actually our accelerator network first. where they were awarded a prize of 60K. So again, the role of financing to grow to the next stage. Then they were introduced to investors, so they were able to raise funds of 6 million in 2019, and they grew to the next stage. So they joined us in the Rising Food Stars in 2020, where we also support them into driving partnerships with corporates here, in their case in Givaudan. And this helped them actually to accelerate the distribution into several markets across Europe. In 2021 and 2022, they managed to raise more than 170 million, which is, I think, one of the most successful cases we have in the agri-food industry across Europe in terms of speed of scaling and to be able to create jobs and also support this journey of transition into alternative protein by having a big name that is coming to the market. So that's it from my side. I hope that was useful to give an idea about what is being done at a European level and the type of support that we give to startups to support on this decarbonization journey.
Thank you so much, Naris, for dedicating your time to share with us what you have been doing so far. I just would like to highlight to our participants that Naris will be able to stay with us for the next half an hour, if I'm not mistaken. I did react to some of the questions by sharing the website of AIT Food, because there was some questions about specific case studies. But if you have a questions, the time is now also to share, because she will not be able to stay with us towards the end. So we would like to encourage everybody to engage. And last but not least, we will also have tomorrow some of the companies that are involved in AIT Food presenting case studies. So there will be also opportunity tomorrow to ask more detailed questions, because there will be very specific case studies. Thank you so much, Naris, and I would like to now introduce Dr. Atsushi Watabe. He has experience in sociology of rural development, population movement, and migration in the Southeast Asian countries. He has been highly knowledgeable about monitoring different kind of environmental policies, including specifically climate change. And he will be presenting to us the research he has been doing with the companies in Japan specifically, among other things. And I would like to warmly encourage you to welcome Dr. Atsushi Watabe. Atsushi, the floor is yours.
Yep, thank you very much. I would like to introduce some of the essences of the study we are conducting slowly with the companies both in Japan and India and some other Southeast Asian countries about what are the potential contribution of the SMEs and startup businesses focusing on the sustainable consumption, sustainable lifestyles, and circular business models, and how we can support the launch and scaling up of these entrepreneurs. Well, next, please. So I would like to first introduce what kind of contributions SMEs and startups can make for mainstreaming circular and sustainable ways of living. And second, I will talk about some challenges and enabling context based on the desktop survey we have conducted. And thirdly, I will introduce some of the cases of the supportive policies for these SMEs and startups. Well, next, please. And so first, about the potential of the circular economy, sustainable living promoted by the SMEs and startups. So there are many categorizations or clusterizations of the innovations by the business models. But here I would like to introduce one of the categorization by Dr. Bokken, which covers the technological innovations, social innovations, and organizational innovations. Technological innovations, for example, means that they're maximizing their efficiency or creating values from their unused materials or waste, or substituting non-renewables to renewable materials, or introducing natural processes for production or delivery. And social type of innovation can support their delivering of functionalities for consumers rather than ownership, or adapting the consumers to play the stewardship role together with their producers, or encouraging sufficiency instead of efficiency or maximization for the consumers. So, the final type, organizational, means the more broader innovation, because these innovations could support consumers to play more role in creating innovations for their sustainable society and environment. Next, please. So here I would like to introduce a few cases. So the first one is more of the technological innovation. One country from the Philippines, which produces furnishing or personal care or lifestyle-related products from the bamboo, which the company and the community members maintain in the Philippines get together. And the consumers can purchase these products and support their activities by donating to their community bamboo forest maintenance activities. And next, please. So the next case is from Vietnam. I think many countries have a similar type of business by the refill services for their daily home or personal care products or food-related products, including Vietnam, Thailand, or Japan, or many other ASEAN countries. But anyway, there one tangible benefits from this business model is the reduction of plastic waste, single-use plastic. But in addition, this company offers their other services like the design and organization of the sustainable wedding ceremony, or organizing the workshop for the consumers or workplaces or communities for promoting green living. Next, please. And the last category will be the organizational one, where I am happy to introduce one case from Japan, which is, well, nominally it's a travel agency, but actually they are supporting their urban residents to travel to their rural areas or depopulated area to support their, for example, their farming or forestry activities locally in the context of the depopulation or aging problem. Or they can organize their local events together with the local people, or sometimes some of them stay there for a while and remote locally from the local communities, and then support their revitalization of the local community and society. So in this case, this service is kind of the services for creating the connection between the people in the urban and rural areas to help their societal transitions. Next, please. But you see, there are a lot of potentials which startups or small, medium enterprises can play in creating sustainable businesses or sustainable societies or circular business models to help consumers to live more sustainably or in a more circular type of consumption. And some of their key aspects of the SMEs and startups could be considered here about why and how they can contribute to the more sustainable and resilient societies. Firstly, because many of their small, medium enterprises start with the concern of the entrepreneurs about their day-to-day concerns in the families or communities or local societies. So their business ideas are quite closely embedded in their real world problems and opportunities. And secondly, as many of the previous presenters have mentioned, well, 90 to 97% of the employment opportunities are provided, including their opportunities for women, youth, and minorities. So in this sense, their support to the SMEs and startups could contribute to the strengthening of the societal basis for creating more viable socio-economic models for sustainability. And last but not least, most of the small businesses and startups are not locked in their incumbent or traditional business models or partners networks, so they are more flexible in creating and putting new ideas into practices. Next, please. However, it's actually quite difficult to pin down how many or how much % of these small businesses or startups are actually working for sustainable businesses. In one study, identified that about 20% or more of the entrepreneurs in megacities globally are working for businesses for environment or societal benefits. But another study says that only 3% of the entrepreneurs are actually working on the environment or community benefits. So anyway, I believe that one of the things we need to consider is to carry out the study of how many % of these businesses could be considered as sustainable or circular business models. Next, please. Next, please. Well, so here I can quickly introduce some of the challenges faced by many of their starting stage or small businesses working for sustainable environmental societies. Well, as many of the previous speakers said, access to finance is a big challenge for small businesses, and sometimes they don't have the sufficient skills for their management of the businesses. And as Ms. Shakir has mentioned, market access and recognition is another big challenge for their startup stage businesses. And they also lack the technical capacities, particularly to develop and well, continuously maintain the quality of product and services for the market. And lastly, another challenge is the time constraint and human resource constraint. Because they don't have often the access to their educational institute to provide their workers or the engineers. And sometimes, particularly for women, they have longer need to engage in their housekeeping activities or parenting activities longer than men. So the support to these people leading their entrepreneurs led by women, youth, or minorities could be considered seriously. Next, please. And but they have some specific chances or enabling contexts. So, well, historically, entrepreneurship studies have focused on some of the personal backgrounds of the entrepreneurs about launching the businesses for sustainability based on their personal experiences, personal skills developed in their education or in the community type of living. But recently, many studies are paying much attention for the ecosystems of their entrepreneurs or supporting organizations, including the investors or governments or networks of engineers or educators, which can inspire and encourage the potential entrepreneurs and engineers to engage in the businesses for societies. So, and another important element of the ecosystems is their accessibility to finance and also their reliable and affordable infrastructures like the cheap electricity, transportation, and waste management systems. Next, please. So I'm not going to read through all of the excerpts, but as the main theme of this ENVforum is rightly said. So what we need to think is not about supporting individual companies, but supporting of their ecosystems to be developed and to be fostering the potential engineers to support themselves and support one another. Next, please. So next, please. Yes. So now I'm going to introduce some of the ideal type of supports to create effective ecosystems for facilitating, promoting their SMEs and startups working for the circular economy, sustainable living, including the food sectors. So first thing we need to consider is the regulational support, because in many countries, in many markets, the incumbent government regulations are in favor of large incumbent companies. We can consider, for example, the cases of their food provision or transportation or their utility services. So sometimes it's useful to consider lifting regulations for the large incumbents and introducing the test beds for SMEs and startups attempting to introduce alternative business models of goods and services. And the second component of support could be the education. In particular, it's quite important to link sustainability-focused education and entrepreneurship education, because usually sustainability education does not teach about entrepreneurship or financing or management skills. And entrepreneurship education does not teach much about sustainability or circular economy. So these two categories should be linked closely to grow more potential entrepreneurs for their circular economy, sustainable living. And it's also quite effective to promote field or real-world education instead of classroom education, where future innovators could work with their real-world problems and tackle with the environmental and societal challenges. And finally, it's necessary to develop the ecosystems by which SMEs can gain and access support to support, including the financial and technical and management type of capacities, and promote networking of these entrepreneurs and supporting organizations, as Ms. Shakil correctly introduced in her presentations. And also, it's quite effective for their SMEs if their governments or other supportive organizations could help their winning consumer recognition about their products and services. And of course, for all of these supports, support to women, youth, and minorities could be especially needed. Next, please. Well, actually, in Asian countries, there are some quite good cases of supportive policies for SMEs and startups aiming for circular and sustainable consumption and lifestyles. For example, Malaysia has put emphasis on the social entrepreneurship in a few successive policies. And now they are trying to introduce a new policy where they are supporting entrepreneurs by providing funds and support to skills development, technical support, and market access. And they also introduced a 3-year income tax exemption for these entrepreneurs working for social and environmental challenges. And one important aspect of this policy is that they emphasize the need to support their entrepreneurs by their so-called bottom 40% of their population, including women, youth, senior group, or native communities, so that they have more significant role in the society of Malaysia to create a more sustainable circular economy in Malaysia. Next, please. The other case is led by UNDP in Vietnam and one company in Vietnam called SDG Challenge, where they trained their young innovators on ideas and skills in developing business models focusing on sustainability challenges in cities and communities in Vietnam. And after the training, they administered a call for proposals, business cases, and provided seed funding, and also showcased their successful cases to their broader Vietnamese society. So by way of showcasing and awarding these businesses, they can inspire more and more innovators for embarking on their adventures for their sustainable business launches. I'll stop here, and I really appreciate the following as well as the previous presentation, quite inspiring presentation in this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Atsushi, for this comprehensive overview that was looking both at the companies and the policy frameworks that you have analyzed in your research. Having said that, I still would like to invite our participants to pose the questions on Whova. I have seen for this session there is not so much activity as for the previous one. It can be related with the fact that our speakers are so comprehensive in their presentations. So thank you so much for your preparation. And then moving on to the next person, I would like to warmly welcome Johan Kim from Global Green Growth Institute. He's country representative in Philippines, in charge of organizations, technical delivery and operations in the country. He is expert on the sustainability agenda and looking into investment and financing. And moreover, his expertise lies in the implementation of both Paris Agreement and the 2030 Agenda. Dear Johan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, moderator. Very good morning and very good afternoon and very good evening. It's my great pleasure to be presenting today. My presentation is about how SMEs and startups are playing key roles as champions driving circular/decarbonized food economy while transforming the landscape of the agriculture sector. So I'll share the reasons why I'm thinking as such briefly today with some of my experience incubating ag startups in emerging and developing economies in Asia. So next slide, please. So before I start, I just wanted to briefly introduce my organization, which is the Global Green Growth Institute. We are a treaty-based intergovernmental organization working with 43 member countries to support their transition towards green economy. More specifically, we support our member countries' efforts to implement the nationally determined contributions of the Paris Agreement and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, depending on the situation of the countries. And then we originate projects, basically, mobilize investment, advise policies, and provide capacity development activities, services across the various sectors, including renewable energy, sustainable transport, waste management, green industry, and climate resilient smart agriculture. And we particularly have a specific impact target of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, creating jobs, advancing climate adaptation capacity, among others. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Now, let's talk about the subject matter today. Just a couple of macro level starting points from my side. This year, we've been experiencing significant challenges threatening the balance or the equilibrium of the agriculture sector. The COVID-19 pandemic, Russia-Ukraine war, usual climate crisis and its related impact like export bans. All of these are pushing the food price. For instance, the wheat price this year jumped 40%. Next slide. Next slide, please. And if you look at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, you can see much of global targets have not been achieved yet. One of the important observations is that several goals, particularly related to poverty, hunger, circular economy, and climate actions, are all connected with the food system. Next slide, please. And if you look at some macro data, you will notice that there is something wrong with the global food industry. Globally, the food industry is producing enough protein, but still a lot of people in developing countries are experiencing hunger. The 44 million population is still in the status of famine, while 1/3 of global food is thrown away. And there is a growing obese population. Also, from the perspective of the climate change, over 18% of global GHG emissions are coming from the agriculture sector. In other words, the way we value agriculture sector performance, mainly via productivity linked to GDP, seems to be not right enough, as we are witnessing these kind of significant negative externalities. Some fundamental changes are required. Now also, smallholder farmers in developing countries are always the ones who hit hardest during these external shocks like pandemic, climate crisis, whatnot, while they are producing raw materials, which are the backbones of the global food system. Next slide, please. Well, challenges always are bringing new ideas of opportunities. It is ironical somewhat, but all the external shocks these days, including pandemic, supply chain disruption, increasing fertilizer cost, climate crisis, etc., now pushing the agri-industrial transformation, mainly led by SMEs and startup tech companies, creating new opportunities. So only in 2021, the globally ag-tech companies raised $14.9 billion. And in the US only, for the same year, $5 billion was invested in over 400 deals backed by the venture capital. The spectrum of these ag-tech companies is wide enough, and these companies are transforming the market landscape. For instance, plant-based meat, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, vertical farming, conserving land and water, food upcycling, reducing food waste, digitization of supply chains, driving resource efficiency, supporting smallholder farmers in developing countries, etc., are happening mainly led by startups. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to discuss a bit by bit about the things that I just explained as a trend, key trends. So first, one of the salient innovation is with the alternative meat. The plant-based meat market has been growing so fast, now with an estimated market value of $24.8 billion by 2030. There are several success stories of the companies raised investment with the plant-based meat, from famous Beyond Meat, Impossible Burger in the US, to several new rising players in the Asian market as well, like Unlimited from Korea. The other growing area is so-called cultured or lab-grown meat. The company called Eat Just feeds animal cells in a clean, sterile environment, mirroring how an animal grows. So currently, Singapore is the only country allowing this cultured meat production, avoiding slaughter, the use of antibiotics and hormones. So with the interest of animal welfare, veganism, health, and then climate consciousness, due to the fact that the livestock management is the leading culprit of the GHG emissions of the agriculture industry, this area is definitely leading a sectoral transformation. Next slide, please. The other ag-tech innovation area is vertical farming. Next slide, please. The concept is simple, basically that agri-produce is grown on levels, one above the other. This significantly reduces the use of both land and water resources, while cutting down the use of pesticides and other chemical products. So there are a lot of innovation happening in Europe and the US and in some of the Asian countries. And then if the technology can be transported, there will be huge opportunities in developing countries as well. So what's important is this kind of approach, this tech innovation will be a key important concept to be part of city planning and landscaping as well. Next slide, please. The other innovation area is about the circular economy. So the innovation is taking place to tackle the food waste issue, basically. There are a variety of approaches from startups. For instance, providing solutions to reduce food stock after the expiry date in Europe and Middle East, which can be replicated basically all food supply chain in the developing countries. Also, there are companies implementing upcycling byproducts from beer factories into an energy bar, basically. So in the farm name Reharvest in South Korea, they're basically implementing those activities. So there are a lot of untapped opportunities for ag tech companies to intervene and provide new value to the food waste. Next slide, please. And then we see huge opportunities happening around the farm as a whole. We are talking about digitization of the farm and then agriculture value chain. The estimate says that the precision agriculture, which can be realized via digitize all relevant information in agriculture value chain, will increase almost 20% in income from smart farming. And then tech innovation has potential to help increase agri productivity even by 70% by 2050. This will be associated with digital literacy kind of capacity development for farmers. And then this will open up untapped opportunities in developing countries as well. Also, I expect that digitization of agriculture value chain may bring youth group back to the agriculture sector workforce, given their high quality of digital literacy. Next slide, please. Lastly, about the blockchain. So the global market of blockchain in agriculture and food supply chain is growing at a CAGR of 47%. There are growing blockchain-based companies driving innovation on the topics of traceability, optimization of food supply chain, crop insurance, transactions, among others. Supply chain infrastructure and efficiency alone, supported by the blockchain industry, could reduce the amount of food waste by $270 billion in value of what is estimated to be $1.5 trillion value problem by 2050. Next slide, please. Lastly, I wanted to briefly share my view that SMEs and entrepreneurs in developing countries should receive special attention as they need to deal with the grand trend of net zero transition pathway while dealing with rampant development challenges and other external shocks that we discussed today. So my organization, the Global Green Growth Institute, has been supporting these early stage startups in developing countries for them to test out their prototype and grow further. Next slide, please. I'm just going to share 3 simple examples. In Indonesia, we supported a company developing an app-based solution to farmers located in islands who are having difficulty of their crop disease and those losses. So AI-based app providing immediate solutions to crop disease via mobile devices, basically. Next slide, please. In Mongolia, we supported a startup providing micro-scale food cold chain solutions based on the small-scale renewable energy, fit to support remote communities residing in Ger, which is a Mongolian traditional house in grassland. So the customers in the remote areas receive fresh food. Next slide, please. In the Philippines, we are currently supporting the smallholder farmers group under the poverty line, and then their cooperatives, by providing upfront capital for them to develop proper infrastructure to manage their produce and process their raw materials into value-added products. Also bringing them to a platform to work with the startups who can digitize information of their produce so that they approach to customers properly, not solely depending on the middlemen who used to dictate the price of output of farmers. Next slide, please. So this is my concluding remarks. Just to summarize, first, the food sector is at risk, as we all know, the price volatility, trade issue, production capacity, climate crisis, waste issue, etc. The tech innovation led by SMEs and startups are currently changing the landscape. The huge opportunity is there. The sector is growing rapidly. And then these companies are playing a significant role of reducing emissions, securing food availability, promoting circularity, driving efficiency, among others. And lastly, the grassroots entrepreneurs in developing countries and least developed countries require more investment and technology transfer during this transition. By saying that, I would like to conclude my presentation, and I would like to congratulate the Asia-Europe Foundation and then ENVforum to organize this timely event. And I just wanted to thank SMEs Eco-Innovation Center as well for the invitation. Thank you very much. Over to you, Gina.
Thank you so much, Johan, and thank you so much for bringing up once again the attention and focus on SMEs and especially startups that are leading innovation. Very often at different events, there is this discussion that it is up to business to shape the new future. And then there is this overall demand now to look at the food system to ensure that the food supply chains are resilient and that we do not have disruptions in the food supplies. But at the same time, very often this issue of making sure that we have technology innovation and we have the companies that are actually driving the change and show the way on how the things can be shaped up and modified. We can now see this happening in the real life, and also thanks to the experts that kindly agreed to join us for this stream. Thank you so much, Johan, and I would like to now introduce Jennifer Morton. She works at the Good Food Institute, APAC, which is a global nonprofit powered by philanthropy that seeks to accelerate innovation in alternative proteins to create sustainable, secure, and just protein supply. When we look at the food supply chains and the emissions, which also was somewhat asked in the earlier questions session, and when we look at the livestock, it is one of the biggest source of GHG emissions. Therefore, having innovation in that important sector is crucial. Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gina, and hi, everyone. So my name is Jennifer Morton. I'm a corporate engagement specialist at the Good Food Institute, APAC. As Gina mentioned, we're a nonprofit organization fueled by philanthropy, and we are dedicated to accelerating the alternative protein sector. So it's really encouraging that almost all of our speakers have touched on alternative proteins as a decarbonization solution, and I'm going to dive into that a bit more in this presentation. So what I want to do is talk a bit about GFI, why we see alternative proteins as part of the decarbonization solution for our food system, what we have found to be the key enablers of scaling the sector faster than market forces alone would allow, and why SMEs are a cohort among many other types of organizations who are really critical for enabling this transition. Next slide, please. So we'll start with the challenge that defines our why, which has already been touched on by our earlier speakers. And that's the consequences of global demographic change that will see our population reach 10 billion by 2050. So we know by now very well from the data that there's a strong correlation between rising income and rising meat consumption. And what you see on the screen here is the expected consumption growth of meat and seafood in Asia, which is one of the regions where the increase in the middle class and thus meat demand will be particularly acute. So this presents us with the quandary of working out how do we feed a growing population while using our resources as sustainably and efficiently as possible in a world where we're increasingly seeing and being confronted with the catastrophic effects of climate change. Next slide, please. So in this conference, we're talking about circular business models, and I want to first zoom out to consider circularity not at the level of an individual SME or a company, but at the level of the food system. So on the one hand, the progress we've made in livestock efficiency is really extraordinary. So a dairy cow produces more than 3 times more milk than a cow did in 1960, and in the same period, beef yield per animal has increased by 65% and egg production by 34%. But viewed in another way, we see that circularity in the current system that we have is limited by the structure of production itself. So animals need to eat before we can eat them. So we can't rely on the system of cycling calories through animals. And here we see the calorie conversion rates, which is the amount of calories we need to feed an animal to produce a unit of meat. And for the most efficient animal that humans consume, which is the top one you see here, the chicken, we need to feed 9 calories to a chicken to get 1 calorie, which is a 13% conversion rate. And that's the most efficient. So you see the other animals have an even lower conversion rate. And in this vein, if we think about cycling calories through animals, it's analogous to wasting food. So we are actually wasting 87 to 97% of food from the very start in the production stage alone. So if you go to the next slide, please. So what does this mean for the topic we're interested in today, which is decarbonization? Well, it means that the potential of decarbonization is significantly reduced as long as we produce meat in this way. So at present, industrial animal agriculture, which you see on the left-hand side, is responsible for 14.5% of greenhouse emissions. And that's a higher share than the entire transport sector, which is at 14%. But decarbonization in the transport sector gets a lot more attention and a lot more funding as a climate solution compared to alternative proteins. And then if you look at the right-hand side of the slide in terms of efficiency, we can also see there that we use 3/4 of our agricultural land for raising and feeding livestock, but this livestock only provides 1/3 of the global protein supply. So we have a big imbalance there. And with the pressures on the environment, we really need to scrutinize and rethink how we should use our scarce resources in the most sustainable and efficient ways. Next slide, please. So the good news is that science and technology have unlocked new avenues of innovation in our food system. And this is where startups and SMEs are especially critical as centers of innovation. And we've already seen some case studies from the other speakers. So I won't go into the specific technologies in detail, but at GFI, we are focused on 3 categories of alternative proteins. The first is plant-based, the second is fermentation-derived protein and ingredients, and the third is cell cultivation technologies. And all of these are enabling us to grow meat from plants and cultivate meat from cells, all without the animal. So there's been an explosion of R&D, of investment, and of product launches in the alt protein sector. And the pathway to cost, taste, and nutrition parity is really within our reach. So I won't go into the case studies today, but we are seeing a lot of pure play alt protein companies, as well as agri-food SMEs pivoting into the sector, who are creating these systems and the inputs for alt protein production. Next slide, please. So I won't dwell on this too much, but just to show the life cycle analyses that have been done, which have found that producing meat by using plants and cells is drastically more efficient. So this one that I have on the screen compares conventional meat with plant-based meat, and you can see the reductions in the region of 80 to 99% for land, for water, for air pollution, for chemicals, and importantly, for GHG emissions. So the reason we exist as GFI is to bring companies who can develop, the products, the ingredients, the infrastructure, the innovations to bring costs down in the sector and really bring products that consumers will buy at scale. Next slide, please. So it's clear that there is a huge environmental benefit from alt proteins, which many of our speakers have talked about. But in this session, we're talking about enablers. So what do we believe as GFI is the enabler for this sector to succeed? So at GFI, our guiding theory of change is market-driven. So we don't expect consumers to give up animal-based meat in favor of more sustainable methods just because it's better environmentally. So what we do at GFI is make products or focus on the ecosystem of making products that taste as good as or better than meat, cost the same or less than meat, and are nutritionally equivalent or better than meat. So we are really laser focused on supporting SMEs, other companies, and the whole ecosystem to develop these sustainable and efficient value chains for producing products, meat, eggs, and dairy that are as delicious as their counterparts and really create the enabling environment for them to succeed. Next slide, please. So we have found that for this sector to scale, GFI needs to work as a force multiplier across 3 cross-cutting areas. And those areas are policy, corporate engagement, and science and technology. And across all of these areas, we are working towards those enablers that I mentioned. So cost parity, taste parity, and nutritional equivalence, while also raising awareness of the sector's benefits to unlock funding and support among the public, research, and the private sector as well. So I will go into a little bit of detail about what we do in each area. So if you go to the next slide, please. So briefly what we are doing, and all of this is supporting SMEs as well as other types of companies. So in policy, we're working with policy actors to see the ways that alternative proteins can contribute to their policy objectives. So it could be sustainability, it could be public health, it could be nutrition, food security. So there are many, many different ancillary benefits of alt proteins that are very relevant for governments both in Asia and in Europe today. And we think this sector needs much more attention and funding given the decarbonisation and other benefits it provides. So we play that role of bringing awareness about the sector to different policy actors. And one of the areas we're also working on for the benefit in particular of SMEs is the regulatory regimes to ensure a clear path to market for their products. As we mentioned, we want companies to focus on what they do best, which is developing the best products they can. So if GFI can support to remove some of these regulatory barriers and difficulties in their go-to-market strategies, then we think we're acting as an enabler for them to reach the market faster, which is in the interest of all of us. Next slide, please. So this is the corporate engagement department, and this is where I personally sit. And we work with all different types of companies. So firstly, companies at all stages of their life cycle. So from startups to SMEs, to agri-food SMEs upstream, agri-food SMEs downstream, investors, multinationals, so all types of companies to help them contribute to the alt protein sector. So some of the work we do is help companies unlock funding. We help investors find deal flow and match these companies and investors together. We give no-fee advisory services, so we're fully fueled by philanthropy. So we are trying to give open source as much as possible to give as many companies the resources designed to produce, to market, and to scale products that will taste the same or better than their conventional counterparts. So some of these resources you see on the screen. So we have directories, we have advisory, and we have a lot of research reports, which are all on our website, free for everyone to use and to disseminate. And I'm not going to go into the segmentation of SMEs, and I think the previous speakers have done a nice job of that. But before I talked about the startups driving innovation, I want to stress there are whole value chains of SMEs, agri-food companies behind these who are pivotal. So there are enormous opportunities, I think, to link SMEs in existing value chains to participate in this sector in APAC and the developing countries here as well. So to take one example, in APAC, we're focused on the localization and diversification of crops and ingredients for plant-based products. So such as pulses like mung beans grown in Southeast Asia, which can be processed into protein ingredients for plant-based products. So to make this possible, we really need to put farmers at the heart of the plant-based sector, unlock value addition for them, for upstream agri-food SMEs, for traditional service providers, and really build upstream value chains that will grow the crops that can be used in these plant-based products. So my personal background is in smallholder farming systems, so I'm really passionate about putting farmers at the center of the system. And plant-based really has an opportunity for value addition at the farm level. And there's a lot of work to do here, which GFI APAC are just beginning. So any collaboration that GFI can do to bring these existing value chains into plant-based is something we think is really important, and we're really open to collaboration on that. So then lastly, in our SciTech stream, which you see here, we have teams of scientists who work for GFI, who are advancing the foundational research to help identify the technical barriers and opportunities to improve plant-based products. And they also help other researchers with knowledge and grants to do the same work in this sector. Another speaker also talked about training the next generation of talent, which is a critical area which GFI also tried to support, projecting manpower needs into the future, setting up university courses, and really trying to make sure that engine is there when the sector scales. As for SMEs, this is one of the critical barriers that they tell us again and again, that talent shortage is a major issue. So we're trying to kind of mitigate that as we move into the future. So if you go one more slide, this is one of our resources that I did want to highlight. And I think it's something that we think has addressed a major barrier that can often occur when we scale new sectors. So this is called our Advancing Solutions for Alternative Proteins database. And it's a result of years of research and interviews and discussions within the sector to catalog the biggest barriers facing SMEs and other actors, and also develop the solution spaces that will enable the sector to scale. So GFI works on some of these challenges that we've identified, and we open source all of the work we do on those solutions. But what we also have with this database is a repository of information and solutions that other organizations can go to avoid duplication and really channel the sector's resources and efforts to the most critical scaling barriers that everyone can collaborate on together. So these are all sorted by actor on our website. So it's easy to see as a government, as an SME, whatever type of organization you are, what the key areas are and how you can get involved. If you go one more slide. And this is my final slide. So to wrap up, at GFI, to come back to our question of scaling an emerging sector, we found that what's been really critical is taking a value chain focus to make sure that the innovation is happening downstream, but also these value chains, existing value chains and new value chains are being developed behind them. And that involves a whole different host of different types of SMEs. And we also find it's very important to support SMEs across their life cycle, understanding what are the needs as a startup and what are their needs at later stages, so we can really make sure all the elements of an enabling environment are in place, which means working across the public sector and the private sector that you see here. So we know we're well on the way to scaling this sector, but we're really only at the beginning, and we're really here to support all actors interested in alt proteins. So whether it's an agri-food SME currently in this space or one wanting to understand what opportunities there are for them, we want to be a systems enabler for all these organizations. So if you go on one more slide, I'll just flash GFI's information and also my contact details if you want to get in touch to discuss and move towards decarbonization of the food system with this solution. And then very lastly, I just like to thank ESA for putting on such a great conference and drawing attention to some of the really critical issues that we should be focusing on today. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for this very comprehensive overview on something that I think we all, but in general, we are looking at the future of food, especially when we are looking at the animal protein alternatives. And that was definitely something that also when we are looking at the shift in the mindset that has been mentioned on different angles as well earlier in those presentations, it would be required, even if the taste and the price and so on and so forth is very similar. This is also something that we are looking at in the health sector and in the food sector as well. If I could now invite our speakers for the closing Q&A session, that would be wonderful. which is basically, yes, thank you so much to the organizing team. And then we are waiting for Mr. Kim to switch on his camera as well. But if I could have like the closing session to all of you, if you would be able to focus on one thing that could actually advance the work forward, both looking at the enablers as well as the decarbonization of the food supply chains, what would be your main focus? Because you all touch upon different things that is related with the technology, that is related with looking at the funding, that is related with the mindset and the shift of the behavior, sustainable lifestyle, and overall circular transition, as well as challenges that are faced by different companies. But if we are looking at overall number of issues, it's very difficult to somehow prioritize. And I'm asking this question also because this conference will have the next step, which some of us will meet in person in Korea later this year to continue this dialogue with also the focus on technology and agri-food supply chains. So for us as ASEF, it's also important to provide added value and focus on the things that are making the biggest difference. So if you could just share with us, if you were to choose one thing, what it would be that you would like our attention to focus on? Maybe I would invite Atsushi to start. Would that be okay?
Yes, well, it's a very difficult question because I learned quite many things from the other speakers today. But anyway, I'm so well impressed by the some of the presenters introduced their initiatives of supporting their SMEs on the food sector. So well, if I choose just one aspect is that, well, continuously developing such initiatives of supporting their whole ecosystems, including entrepreneurs, investors, educators, and so on, so that they can collectively move forward with their innovations of their food systems in specific cities or countries. Well, yeah.
Thank you so much, Atsushi. If we can now move to Jennifer, what you would, I know you summarized and you had a kind of couple of summarizing slides actually, but from your perspective, when you look at the needs of the sector you are working on, what would you think would make the biggest difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always to be guided by the data. So I think to really understand, you know, are we decarbonizing something that at the end of the day won't have that much importance? So we can focus circularity, but if making that circular business model does not really contribute to the root cause, then I think we really need to direct our resources to where the most good can be had. I think one thing that I think is really important is, you know, it's almost a good thing that there are a plethora of solutions. So alt protein is one, but there are others, and there's no silver bullet. So I think it's about, you know, making sure that we direct resources to a multitude, but the highest impact causes, and that we don't see these as opposed. So I think something that's really interesting is sometimes we find innovation at the edges. So often alt protein is pitched against, say, the traditional livestock sector, but actually if we work together to see, you know, what is innovation at the edges. So for example, there was a farmer in Australia who was a livestock farmer, but started growing pulses on the farm to contribute to alt proteins. So I think it's about kind of not seeing this as oppositional, but really saying where are the opportunities to collaborate. And I think that's where we can see some of the biggest opportunities when we really focus on enabling an entire ecosystem, which requires as many actors as possible.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. If we can now move to Johan, thank you so much. What would be your one thing that you would like to share with us?
Well, first of all, thank you, Gina, for asking that kind of question, because it's always important to have a tangible outcome out of this kind of discussion, because we don't want to talk only. So having said that, I just wanted to point out the incubating system of this kind of food startup, especially in developing countries. because the first speaker, who is running the European incubator, so the default setting is totally different from some of the emerging or least developed economies in Asia, so to speak. So if you look at the incubating system, incubators, accelerator, you can't really find many. This is also related to the finance issue touched upon other speakers. So I just wanted to rectify one thing. I mean, I think the speaker in the previous session, mentioned that there's a problem of finance, but I do want to challenge that the finance is there. See, the problem is how to access finance from the startups and SME point of view, especially in developing countries. So the whole incubation system that I wanted to propose is this forum, and then Asia Europe Foundation can provide some support mechanism to better incubate and better accelerate these kind of SMEs and startups in developing countries by transferring knowledges and incubation ecosystem from some European countries, etc. So that's the point that I wanted to make. And also in terms of finance, in relations to that, there are multiple ways of bringing finance, but if you have the skittish investor mindset, so these SMEs and startups will never be financed. So we need to have a patient capital, impact capital, some sort of this kind of capital should be flowing into some markets in need, basically. So I stop here. Thank you, Gina, for the invitation.
Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing what you would prioritize. It is always very tricky, especially when we are trying to do it from our side and we are trying to look at what should be the topic to focus on. Is always challenging. But this is also why today we have with us Luca Kosiema, and then he will be working further on as a follow-up of this session to prepare policy brief that we will be also sharing with you all for consultations. And then further on in the lead up to the conference that will be taking place in Korea later in the year. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your time and dedication to this session. And the only thing I can do just to invite everybody for what is next to follow, because we will continue our discussion focusing more on the farming and agriculture and decarbonization in that particular element of the food supply chain. Thank you so much, everybody.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wei Li Wu, and I am the Innovation Lead at Grow Asia. We're a multi-stakeholder platform that builds partnerships in Southeast Asia to broker solutions for more sustainable, resilient, and inclusive food systems. I would really like to welcome you to stream 2 today. Grow Asia is really glad to be a knowledge partner for this year's Asia-Europe Environment Forum. And we are also very delighted to have today a diverse panel of speakers who will be introducing their organization's role in the innovation ecosystem in various countries in Asia and Europe where they work, and how those innovations are helping to contribute to a cleaner agri-food supply chain. Now, without further ado, because we have 5 speakers today, let me introduce our first presenter. We will have 5 presentations and then afterward time for Q&A from the audience, which I would like to be as engaging as possible. So please go ahead while the speakers are presenting. You can feel free to put in your questions in the chat box, and we will answer the ones that we can after all the speakers have spoken. So without further ado, let me introduce Mr. Don Tan from Pinduoduo, the largest agriculture-focused technology and e-commerce platform in China. Don is the director responsible for corporate affairs at Pinduoduo, and he previously worked at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Singapore. Don, let me pass the stage over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Weili. Hello everyone, I'm Don from Pinduoduo, and it was a very kind introduction from Weili as well. I am very happy to be here with all of you to share about how Pinduoduo leverages technology to improve every stage of the agri-food value chain. And this includes how technology can and has made the agri-food supply chain cleaner and greener. Next slide, please. So a bit of background about us. Pinduoduo is China's leading agriculture platform. We connect over 880 million consumers directly with more than 16 million farmers. In 2020, $42 billion worth of agricultural products were transacted on our platform. As an agriculture platform, we benefit from, and we also want to contribute towards, a vibrant, resilient, and sustainable agricultural sector. This is why we launched the 10 billion Chinese yuan initiative with the goal of advancing agri-tech, promoting digital inclusion, and giving agri-tech talent and workers a greater sense of motivation and achievement. Next slide, please. So what we do is we actually streamline agri-food distribution. So a bit of background about what we do. Pinduoduo was founded in 2015 around making the digital economy work for small businesses, particularly smallholder farmers. So for us, in the context of my presentation, the SMEs are the smallholder farmers and the small agri-merchants. So a bit of background on that as well. E-commerce started with non-perishable, such as books, electronics, and household items, and mostly with merchants that were already of a certain size. So businesses in these sectors benefited from joining the digital economy. And we saw that agriculture was conspicuously missing. This also means that it was not getting the benefits from being plugged into the digital economy, and it could not benefit from the streamlining, the efficiencies from streamlining distribution like the rest of them. The best way to do this is to illustrate this with the example of garlic farmers from Henan. Henan is well known for its garlic, and this is selling garlic from Henan to Shanghai. Conventionally, the garlic farmers sold the garlic to off-takers. The off-taker determines the price, in this case 2 yuan per kilogram at the top of the slide, and then the off-taker sells the garlic to the regional distributor who sells it on to several other distributors before it reaches the retail outlet, where the consumer pays 16 RMB per kilo. This is an 8 times price markup, and food loss and waste in distribution can be as high as 40%. So with Pinduoduo, we make the connection between farmers and consumers more direct. On the platform, farmers can see transparently the final clearing price of garlic. Farmers can set the price by themselves, and in this instance, they set a final price of around 4 yuan per kilo after looking around on the platform. And they can do so and sell directly to consumers. So as a result, consumers get the garlic directly, and they get a 75% price saving and fresher garlic. Farmers also make about 30% more per kilo after deducting distribution and packaging costs associated with online commerce. And the garlic sold to Shanghai traveled 16% less distance and expended 38% less fuel than if it went through the conventional means. Overall, we've estimated as well that food loss and waste is cut to 25% of total production, which is much lower than the 40% global average that we saw in the WWF Tesco report. So what we do is, and how we do it is we make agriculture e-commerce work with our user interface, which is more interactive and fun. And beyond that, we continue to apply technology to make distribution more efficient, including by building out the cold chain logistics network with our logistics service partners and developing smart routing systems to reduce idling of cold chain resources. We are patiently working on these to cut food loss and waste, as well as emissions. Next slide, please. So finally, I think in addition to what we're doing on the supply chain, while we started at the downstream and the midstream, we also seek to harness technology at the upstream to make it a lot more efficient at the cultivation stage. And one of the ways that we do so is through our annual Smart Agriculture competition. Working with the FAO and Wageningen University and Research, as well as the other partners that you see on the slide, we challenge teams to apply technology solutions to make planting more efficient and also more sustainable. In the first edition on the left, we pit man versus machine with young digital agriculture teams from around the world and domestic growers challenging one another. The AI teams developed one-click planting solutions that produce 3 times as much strawberry by weight in the same space. And technology used in some of these greenhouses have already been developed for and applied to many major strawberry growing regions in China, which helps to cut the total production or rather improve the yield for the same input and also improve it in terms of the environmental impact. In the second edition on the right, we had a remote tomato growing challenge also in the same greenhouses with contestants combining nutrition science, computer vision, deep learning, and precision technology. So through this competition, we saw that the finalists were able to double the yield of the top of the range nutritional value for the tomatoes, and they also reduced water requirements in planting. During the competition, they also did other kinds of R&D in the process, developing disease prediction models that cut losses and low pollution, low cost carbon dioxide enrichment equipment that enhance plant growth. So to conclude, I think we are strong believers in applying technology to make agri-food more sustainable, and we hope that stakeholders everywhere explore possibilities. So we're very happy to be here to share our experiences, but I would say more importantly, to listen and learn about the experiences of everyone in reducing the carbon footprints in their respective spaces. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dawn, for that and for sharing with us how Pinduoduo is really making concrete efforts all along the supply chain actually to decrease the carbon footprint of the agri produce that is being sold through your platform. And we'll definitely, I think, come back to you with a lot of more questions later. I'd like to introduce our second speaker, Ms. Yoon-sil Choi from the Agri-Tech Startup Incubator Center of the Korea Agriculture Technology Promotion Agency. This is an agency of the government, so we're taking a slightly different angle for our second speaker, who will be sharing more on what the Korean government is doing to incubate startups in the space. Before this role, Yoon-sil was working in the Agri-Environmental Energy team on policy environment for climate change. And she has a master's degree in environmental life cycle engineering from Konkuk University. Welcome, Yoon-sil, to the stage, please. Thank you.
Hello, I am Yoon-sil Choi in Korea Agricultural Technology Promotion Agency, and I am delighted to introduce Korea's agricultural sector climate change policy. I'm really looking forward to all the presentations in this session. Now let's start the presentation. Next, please. The content of the presentation is first, Korea's greenhouse gas emissions. I said carbon footprint here, but I'm going to talk about emissions from an inventory perspective. And second, the Korean government's efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And third, I will talk about the cases of SMEs who are working to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Next, please. Now, let's start first. Next, please. Korea is ranked 9th in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and is one of the top 10. Next, please. If you look at the global greenhouse gas emissions by industry group, the largest part is the power generation sector, and the second is the agriculture, forestry, and land use sectors at almost the same level. Looking at Korea, in 2018, the agriculture sector doesn't actually account for much. Next, please. However, Korea is a country where protein consumption is expected to increase vertically by 2050. Therefore, the control of greenhouse gas emissions in Korea's livestock sector is a fact that cannot be overlooked. Next, please. And against this background, I would like to tell you about Korea government efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in food sector. Next, please. Korea's greenhouse gas reduction policies in the agricultural sector include regulatory policies for major companies and support policies for farmers. Next, please. Let's take a closer look at regulatory policies targeting businesses. I mean the large company. There are two types of policies, both of which are fundamentally regulated based on greenhouse gas emissions. The name of the first policy is Greenhouse Gas Energy Target Management System. This policy is commonly applied to all industries, not only for the food sector. And this system is being implemented by the Korean Ministry of Environment. In this policy, companies set targets for greenhouse gas reductions through negotiations with the government. If the company fails to achieve the negotiated reduction, it will be fined. Fines can be up to $7,000. Target companies include feed production companies, bakery food companies, and food companies that manufacturing ice cream, etc. in 2021. And 19 companies or business sites implemented greenhouse gas reduction through this system. Next, please. Second policy is called Korea ETS. The full name is Emission Trading System. It is probably the same system as the EU ETS, which you are almost familiar with. Simply put, in this policy, companies that emit a lot of greenhouse gases among target companies achieve their goals by trading emissions rights to companies that emit less greenhouse gas. It corresponds to a reduction policy that utilizes the market economy. The target companies are larger than those under the greenhouse gas and energy target management system. And there is also an emission trading market in Korea. Greenhouse gas traded at, I think, $30 per ton of CO2. And next, please. The following is the support policy for farmers. First, there is a voluntary greenhouse gas reduction project. This policy has a system almost similar to the CDM business. There are technologies that correspond to a total of 19 methodologies set by the government. If a farmer proves that he or she has voluntarily reduced the greenhouse gas emissions with this methodology, the government pays $10 per 1 ton CO2 to purchase the reduction. In this way, the farmer saves energy and also gains additional income. Next, please. And second, there is a low carbon agricultural and livestock certification system. This square mark is the certification mark. If there are 31 items of standard greenhouse gas emissions and the farmer emits less than the standard amount, you can attach this mark to the agriculture. The standard emission amount is a calculated value based on national statistics. Sorry, next please. Finally, let me tell you about the case of SMEs. Next, please. This is the eco-friendly packaging sector. It is a good distributor called Collie. This company handles a lot of agricultural products with a low carbon certification mark. In addition, they use only paper box, no styrofoam box, and make the consumer use the reusable box at the shipping stage. Actually, I am using it too, this purple box. In addition, box tape is made of paper and is easy to recycle. And next, please. In Korea, like global companies such as Beyond Meat, there are many SMEs that make alternative protein foods. The main ingredient is soybeans, but some companies make chicken using mushrooms. And next, please. The food upcycling, there is an ugliest specialist in collecting only ugly farm products from food distribution and shipping it at an affordable price. With food upcycling, there is a Jiguin company which produces meat, dumpling, etc., made from grain to reduce grain stock. And Jiguin is Korean and it means earthling terrain, like that. In Jiguin company is also make efforts to reduce its carbon footprints by changing its logistics to electric vehicles. Next, please. Finally, this concludes my presentation. My presentation got a lot of help from Google Translate. And any questions are welcome, but if I give wrong answers or fail to answer, it is because of my poor English skills, I'm sorry. So if you need further answers, please email me. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Yunso, for sharing on the work that the Korean government is doing, and also for highlighting those examples of innovator SMEs, as was previously mentioned in Korea. And also, we can see how the Asia is obviously a very diverse place, and in terms of kind of consumer profiles and where there's a transition in terms of diets to, for example, more meat consumption, that's quite varied in the region as well, especially as compared to Europe. So we're just taking it from a different shift in geography from China and Korea. We're going to zoom in on India now, and from a different part of the supply chain as well. I'd like to introduce Mr. Vikram Sarvajna from Agtual. Vikram founded this agri-tech startup, Agtual, in 2019. Before starting Agtual, Vikram worked at Rabobank. He also holds a master's degree in computer science from the Technical University of Delft in the Netherlands. So over to you, Vikram. Thank you.
Thank you, Weili, and thank you for having me here. And I was just thinking about the mushroom-based chicken that caught my attention from the previous speakers. So that's an interesting concept. But again, thanks for having me here. Like Weili said, I'm Vikram, founder of the startup called Agtual. We essentially are creating tools that enable climate adaptation and risk management solutions for smallholder farmers. We are essentially an Indo-Dutch company. We've started out working in India and now slowly expanding to a couple of other regions. Next slide, please. So if you look at what kind of work we do, like I said, we provide tools for climate adaptation and risk management for smallholder farmers. And our work is pretty much spread out throughout the entire value chain, mostly, of course, on the upstream activities of agriculture. On the production side of things, we provide data using remote sensing and weather data. We collate these things together to create risk classifications, which then enable crop insurance companies and financial lenders to provide these loans or insurance products to smallholder farmers to de-risk them. We use a similar data set to create a monitoring, reporting, and verification tool for entities that promote climate smart agricultural practices with smallholder farmers. So we enable them to monitor these. I will go into a little bit more detail in the next slide. And finally, we also work on the post-harvest phase, and that is more on the price risk management for smallholder farmers. Our belief is that when we are talking about smallholder farmers pretty much across the world, and we are talking about risk management solutions, we need to provide them risk management solutions right from the start, that is from the production until the goods have been sold. So it is not enough, according to us, to provide the farmer with an advisory to shift a crop, because that is just an advisory. Let's say that it's an Indian farmer who has been doing paddy all his or her let's say 10 years of production on their farm, and we are suddenly asking this farmer to shift to, let's say, millets, which is a very interesting crop. It is high value, and the farmers does shift from paddy to millets, and then we cannot ensure that the market offtake is there. So this farmer might have an awesome produce of millets, very good for the soil health also. But then if they cannot sell it and they will not get the economic benefit out of it, the next season you're back to square one and you're again back to paddy, which is a very water consuming crop and not very best for a lot of areas of India. That's why we work right from production to post-harvest. Next slide, please. So I'm zooming into one part of the solution, which is essentially a MRV platform that we have created for entities that provide climate smart agricultural advisory to farmers. Here, the problem is that, let's say you have a entity like Syngenta Foundation in India who are doing amazing work in providing training on climate smart agricultural practices to farmers, yet their data collection costs and their monitoring costs of these programs are exorbitant. And they were looking for ways on how to monitor, plan their interventions more smartly, and essentially make it data efficient. So that's where we started this experiment together with them, where we said that on this particular, let's say they are working on a particular program where they're advising on water efficient technologies. And they want to monitor whether during the season, they've provided these different technologies, has the adaptation been there or not with these farmers, and where has that been lagging? So that's essentially the kinds of insights that this platform provides. So we start by first advising the entity with where is the best area to provide these kind of interventions, be it crop diversification, be it efficient usage of water, couple of other, or maybe efficient usage of chemical pesticides or insecticides, or completely cut them out. So those kind of interventions, what is a good area to intervene? What would be the right recommendations? And then because an entity like a Syngenta Foundation might have also donors, they would also like to report to the donors in a very systematic fashion how the change has been affected and which are the areas which are lagging, which are the areas that need more attention, without putting a lot of reporting time and effort from their own. So that's the third part that we work together, where we kind of standardize these reporting mechanisms. And finally, we are trying to create new revenue streams because we are capturing these data points. That's the next slide. So when I say new revenue streams, it's actually what we discovered because we were already working with crop insurance companies. We were already working with financial institutions and with entities who were doing regenerative. I'm using climate smart agriculture practices and regenerative farming a bit interchangeably. Of course, there are nuances, but we saw that the requirements of these entities in terms of data requirements are 80% the same. Let's say you have 10 parameters that you would like to monitor on a farm. 8 out of these 10 are common across these sets of financiers, insurers, and agricultural companies. So what we are trying to do, and we are trying to evangelize, and we see a lot of entities also working in this, that let's together create some kind of a data sharing protocol, data sharing standards, per farm, or let's say per district, per village. And then once you've captured this data in a standard format, we believe that it would attract many more financiers to come into the ecosystem, many more insurers, and also a lot more climate smart advisory entities, which will ultimately bring the scale at the smallholder farmers level, where you can really see the effects of decarbonization. Because in a country like India, we have more than 100 million smallholder farmers. We really need technology to bring down costs of delivering and also catalyze decarbonization. So that's something I would look forward to discussing and also hearing your thoughts. That concludes my presentation. Thanks a lot for having me. And my email address is here, but also on the networking event of the platform, my addresses are given. So would happily entertain some more questions. Looking forward to some more discussions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vikram, for reminding us of the over 100 million farmers smallholder farmers in India, whose contributions to the food supply chain are absolutely crucial. We're actually following this small scale farming connection, but shifting gears and shifting countries again from India over to France, where our next speaker, Mr. Etienne Barriot, is based. Etienne is the CEO and co-founder of Rise Ag, a startup building a tech-verified carbon finance platform in agriculture. Rise's mission is to accelerate the adoption of regenerative agriculture through carbon finance. Etienne co-founded the startup after graduating science and working for a few years in finance. And let me just hand the floor over to him without further ado. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Weili, for the invitation. So I'm Etienne, one of the co-founders of Rise. Next slide, please. So at Rise, our mission is to use carbon finance to make sustainable and regenerative agriculture financially attractive for farmers. Next slide, please. So maybe to talk about the main figures here, agriculture is responsible for nearly a quarter of greenhouse gases emissions worldwide, which translates into 70% of our food carbon footprint. And through the implementation of regenerative agriculture, not only we have the opportunity to reduce emissions, but also to create, as regards Europe, the largest natural carbon sink, even before forestry, and also to increase other environmental benefits such as biodiversity, water quality, or long-term food resilience. Next slide, please. But in this journey towards regenerative agriculture, farmers are facing several problems. The first one is that they need help to make the right decisions as regards the different practices that are going to implement to improve the health of their soils and reduce their emissions, such as using legumes or cover crops. But they also need, like anyone who makes an effort, financial support and reward to actually get into regenerative agriculture. Next slide. And that's where Rise comes in the picture. So on one side, we enable farmers to decrease their emissions and store carbon in soils. We're going to help them generate high quality carbon removals that we can sell on the voluntary carbon markets to companies and organizations that are looking to go towards net zero, which in turn generates funding for the carbon projects of the farmers. Next slide. The way the solution looks like is through a digital platform. The first step is for farmers to make their carbon calculation through our MRV infrastructure, monitoring infrastructure. And based on their results, they will be able to create an action plan. And if they decide to implement those practices, we'll be able to get them into certification programs in order for them to access financing based on their practices. Next slide, please. Like any kind of finance, it's based on trust, and this trust comes from high quality carbon removals that are certified through robust certification frameworks. The one we're using in France is the national standard, the Label Bas Carbone, which is available since 2021. But as we are going to expand internationally, we are going to use geographical agnostic standards such as VCS, gold standard, or other robust frameworks. And we might be using as well the future EU regional carbon crediting scheme. All of those schemes have in common some strict criteria as regard additionality, the scientific quality of the measurement, the permanence, which usually means that the projects we're going to look at are going to last for several years, and the verification usually through audits. Next slide. For this, we have created a robust monitoring infrastructure that's going to rely on several technologies, modeling of the carbon sequestration, of the carbon emissions based on the data of the farm, and as well traceability of those data and possibly even collection through satellite imagery and artificial intelligence. Some standard might as well require some soil sampling, which is an imperfect way to measure carbon as well. Next slide, please. The way we've created the platform is to be a collaborative tool for supply chain in such a way that it's not only available for farmers, but it's also available for their entire ecosystem. So today we're engaging farm advisors as well on those projects, and we're looking into creating an access as well for food and beverage industries for them to monitor the decarbonization of their supply chain. Next slide, please. And maybe to finish on a few key figures as regards RISE, we've been created slightly more than 1.5 years ago. We've already more than 30 partners in France that are deploying our solution and helping the farmers engage in regenerative agriculture. We have more than 300 farmers currently using our solutions. And we've as well secured a significant amount of funding for the farmers, more than 50,000 tons, which are worth more than 2 million euros worth of carbon credits. And today we are an expanding team that has just passed the bar of 20 people. And maybe for the last slide, today our solution is available in France and in Romania, where we've started a first project, and we're expecting an international expansion as early as next year. Final slide, and thank you very much. Happy to answer your questions later on.
Thanks so much. Thanks for that presentation, Etienne, and for ending exactly on time. Now I'd just like to go to our final speaker for the presentation section, Ms. Julia Dalmadi from Transfood Mission, where we're staying in Europe at the moment, but moving a bit down the supply chain closer to the consumer, who in some cases and geographies is really at the center of driving change in terms of decarbonization. Julia is a food futurist with digital and food innovation experience. She is equipped with human and planet-centered design and system thinking, as well as connections to a global network of food protagonists. Julia's vision is to engage, cross-pollinate, and build the sustainable future of our food system. Over to you, Julia. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And yes, so starting from our current food system, and the currently used linear system, the take-make-waste model is definitely not putting resources to their best use. Spaces are abandoned, food and byproducts are wasted, human resources are underutilized, and also infrastructures. Are these not all missed opportunities in our food system? Next slide, please. In a current food system, we face a lot of challenges. One of them is the food industry is complaining about the continuously increasing prices, yet they waste over 1/3 of our food, and 62% of this is actually stemming from production stages. Furthermore, 25% of this, their capacity, is not used. Then they say how challenging it is to continuously change up to the consumer's demand, but it takes them 2 years to develop a new food product. Finally, they say it's very challenging to find the right human resources and human capital. because they don't even consider the adjacent industries and the knowledge and know-how which is collected there. So they created a system with efficiency-related solutions, what are not serving the needs of our current food system and our planet. Next slide, please. So we believe that SMEs are coming into the picture at this stage because we have the possibility to move fast and adapt fast based on demand and help these also bigger companies, multinational companies, to think differently and guide them through an industry transition. Next slide, please. As we could hear on the previous panel, and also thanks to the previous speakers, we have many solutions for decarbonization along the supply chain. And as Bailey also mentioned, we are moving closer to the consumer because we shouldn't let them out of the equation, because we all have at least one connection to our food system through consumption. So every single decision we make by our food choices have an influence on our diet, have an influence on our environment. And every single actor and stakeholder in the supply chain has the responsibility to evaluate how can they make or create solutions which are using the available resources and planetary boundaries to the best step. So while I am very engaged in all of these steps, I needed to understand we cannot make as one company change along the entire chain. So if we go to the next slide, you can see we decided to focus on waste management. Now, waste, as I mentioned, is created along the supply chain on every step. We focus on manufacturing stages and processing, where a lot of byproducts, so-called byproducts and surplus, are created in a bigger volume at one place, because this obviously helps us logistically to find those valuable resources which otherwise would have been wasted, or best case scenario going to animal feed, and turn them into new nutritious products. And exactly at that stages, we also identify other wasted resources like production capacities and the missing knowledge. So if we go to the next slide, please. So we need to understand that food waste is actually a global inefficiency. Despite saying that, no, we don't have any byproducts in our company, all of them do, but they are just used to the fact that it shows up as an expense on their balance sheet. So what we need to find is a global solution for how to use those resources, and don't even consider them waste, because if we go to the next slide, we can finally understand that waste is value. Either it shows up as an expense, or we can make use of it and turn them into raw materials in our production processes. Next slide. Sorry, I will need to say next slide a lot of times because of the animation. Because basically the value or the waste what we are wasting is nutrition, because there are so many byproducts which are full with fiber and protein and other nutrients, what we don't even consider as ingredients. Economically, these are even showing up as expense because we pay someone to take it as a biofuel ingredient, or thinking about those 25% capacities not being used. That's all the opportunities what we could use for creating new edible products. Finally, environmentally, if we would consider all these resources as raw materials, we wouldn't need to use our planetary boundaries and produce new ingredients. And finally, once we reach this, obviously distribution is the next chapter, where we need to give access to a wider range of people to highly nutritious food. Next slide, please. This is where co-petition comes in. And I believe exclusivity is not the word what we should use in the food industry in the future. And we need to understand that by putting all these available resources into one pot and turning them into new value-added products, that's how the industry will go and create a better and more resilient market. If we go to the next slide, you can see the different elements. So I mentioned byproducts, I mentioned capacity, I mentioned know-how. Now, these don't necessarily need to come from the same company, but within the ecosystem, we as Transfood Mission, please next slide, we will be able to provide a platform where every food industry stakeholder can plug in with their available resources and create something together what is available for the entire supply chain. Next slide, please. So as it sounds, it is complex indeed. I also felt that it will maybe be a bit challenging to convince food industry stakeholders, so we needed to lead by example. Last year, we decided to use the beer production byproduct, the brewer's pen grain, and turn it into a delicious breakfast cereal, what we started to put on the market last August. We are selling it through different online and offline channels and working with multiple breweries in the country. Currently, we are based in Hungary and focusing on this market and the Central and Eastern European region. Currently, we are launching the next product from the same byproduct, which is a salty snack. And this is where it comes to the point where we use our ecosystem, and it will be sold under the brand of our partners and not necessarily under our own. Next slide, please. So if we think waste-free and we finally eliminate this word from our dictionary, we will be able to create nutritional, economically, environmentally, and socially sustainable food systems and also products. Next slide. Because we will have more value-added, so-called upcycled products, and this is not just a trend, it's here to stay. Less expensive product development and also faster, not 2 years, but I mentioned at the beginning, less use of natural resources and more equitable access to food. Because currently the 1/3 of food what we are wasting is actually contributing to 8% of our greenhouse gas emissions globally. Next slide. So I would like everyone to think about how does their waste taste. Let it be a manufacturer, let it be a retailer, let it be a consumer, so everyone along the supply chain. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Julia, for ending on that very thought-provoking question. And I think one that all of us, as you mentioned, as consumers can appreciate. So we've come to the question and answer and section of our panel. Just for everyone who's participating online, if you have any questions, please go ahead to put it in the Whova Q&A chat, and my colleagues will flag that up to us as well. Otherwise, I think I have a few questions that I'd like to pose our panelists. Maybe starting with circling back to Dawn, since we're still at that kind of consumer end of the supply chain. Let's stay there for a little while. I was wondering if you could share with us a bit more on really what it is in the Chinese context that drives Pinduoduo's efforts to decarbonize the value chain. Is it something that you're seeing from the users of your platform, from Chinese consumers, or is it more an internal decision or part of your strategy, for example, related to cost savings? Would just invite you to share a little bit more on that and how it's playing out in China.
Sorry,
Don, I think you're muted. Yeah.
Yep. So thanks a lot for that question. It's quite a good one, especially because a lot of people are concerned about what interest people in China have regarding this issue. Ultimately, I would say that because of China's population size, there's a lot of concern about what it is interested in doing and what it does. As a company, I would say that our objective is directly connecting consumers and farmers and then getting them to benefit from the digital economy. But at the same time, the base of all this, what's underlying all this, is our objective to benefit all. And when we mean benefit all, I would say it is benefiting all of our users, whether on both sides of it, as well as benefiting future generations. And that is where sustainability comes in. So, of course, carbon dioxide emissions, or reducing carbon dioxide emissions, is quite important for us because it is really an issue of sustainability. That being said, I think as a company, or a platform rather, we are not really in a position to say that we want to take a position on something or another, because we connect farmers and consumers. The objective is to uplift the smallholder farmers and make it sustainable for them first. And then what we are hoping to do, and what we have done, is actually, they are all actually profit positive moves. For instance, by cutting down on food loss and waste through some of the optimizations that we do, farmers can earn more, and then consumers also get better prices. And overall, we also cut the time spent in transport, and also at the same time cut the emissions through the transport process. So a lot of things we do are still at this level, I would say profit positive. And we hope that through our focus on working with farmers and making it work for them, and then optimizing in this way, then we kind of cut the carbon emission. But I would say let's look at it the other way, which is we think it is a huge part of sustainability. We want to do our part for sustainability because that's the only way we can do well. But it's not the only thing to look at. We should not really have too much of a tunnel vision, I would say, on this point, given our position as an e-commerce platform. Yeah.
Don, if I may follow up with that, I was just thinking about the point that Julia was making about food waste and manufacturing and this idea of co-opetition. And I was also curious if Pinduoduo has looked at kind of more of the waste element from a kind of collaboration perspective, if you're looking to collaborate in this space, because of course when we look at food supply chains, they're very complex and involve many actors, and especially when you look at SMEs, right, you're talking about many hundreds or thousands of companies. So I'm curious if you're thinking about that at all.
That is something that we do look at, but at this stage, it is premature to share what we can do and what we want to do in this space. I think the main thing is that we are a B2C e-commerce platform, right? So most of the items that are sold to us end up with the consumer. So it is more of an issue of how to solve the waste issue at the consumer level. I think there's a lot of consciousness of that at both the social level and the political level in China, but that is not really something within our ambit at the moment.
Thanks, Don, for that. Just along this same idea, when I was talking about driving change and whether it's coming from consumer side or others, I just wanted to pivot a bit to Yoon-sil and ask, in your slides you mentioned that the Korean government is creating these low carbon agricultural products certification, which is quite interesting. And I thought it might be interesting to share with the audience as well, whether this was more consumer-driven, government-driven, like in terms of regulations and wanting to meet targets, or was it something that came more from your private sector stakeholders?
Actually, this policy is, I think, completely government-driven. Actually, it started as a pilot project in 2011, and it started as a Rural Development Administration, which means RDA, created a life cycle inventory database and started basic research. And actually, the large company needs this low carbon mark to appeal their eco-friendly. So it is actually first started from government driven, but now it's large company wanted to take this certification to appeal consumer. They are very eco-friendly company. So I think it's very voluntary system, and there is no regulations something. So I think it's running very well in food sector in Korea.
Have you seen interest also by SMEs in taking this up because of the success that it's had so far?
SMEs, as perspective of low carbon certification. Actually, in Korea, a lot of farmers are almost SMEs in Korea. So this certification is only for the farmers, the farming products, so not for the food products. So there are a lot of items. The number is 60 items, such as apple or the carrots, like something like that. So yeah, if some farmers got this low carbon mark, they can get more money to sell their products to large company. when they get this mark. So it is very well processed in this system, that economic system in Korea, I think.
Thanks for sharing and clarifying. I think that shows that already actually this policy is targeting SMEs in the agri-food space in Korea. Yeah, which is very encouraging and good to see that happening. I would like to take a question from the audience, actually, directed to Etienne on the topic of trust and whether you see any for the growth in offsets markets, if there's any learnings you can share on the idea of building trust in the voluntary carbon market, because I think this is an issue that we often see and is going to affect the uptake by SMEs of these types of mechanisms.
Yeah, that's actually a good question. There are plenty of ways I could answer that question. What we observe here in Europe is that there is more and more demand. The demand for carbon credits, carbon removals is exploding at the moment. And companies are currently educating themselves on those carbon removals. And as of today, we see a lot of different standards that are rising across Europe, across the world for certifying those carbon credits. But we see that a number of those certification systems or certification standards do not meet the basic criteria or the scientific criteria that I've just exposed. For the moment, those carbon credits are still being bought, but what we expect in the future is that as companies are going to become more and more aware on what they are buying, they will be more and more, I would say, strict on the quality of those carbon credits. So once again, I truly believe that not only the market is really going to exclude low quality certification standards, but I also think that for the long-term good of the carbon finance industry, the voluntary carbon markets, is going to be important for everyone to go towards higher quality standards and a high level of trust. That's the only way this industry could actually fly.
Thanks for answering that question, Etienne. There's another question that's come in from another audience member that's not directed at any specific speaker, but I think probably it makes more sense for Vikram and maybe also Don and Etienne to answer this question. So we've actually talked quite a bit about farmer adoption of different types of technology that's going to enable them to decrease their farmer footprint. And the question is, I'll just read it first. So in some countries like the Philippines, majority of farmers and producers are 60 and above, the age of 60 and above, and there's a big knowledge gap in terms of digital literacy. What are your thoughts and some actions in addressing the need to engage the next generation in agriculture? So I think the question, if we tie it back to this panel, is a little bit about when we talk about these types of innovations that we're encouraging farmers to adopt, whether it's in France or in India, it's easier and maybe for the next generation to be adopting them. But do you see a role or rather a connection between engaging this next generation, the role of these digital technologies, and in the question is actually also asked about how this relates to food security. But I think maybe we can address the first part, this piece about uptake of innovations and engaging the next generation in agriculture. And I might also pose this question to Julia as well, because I think you're working with a lot of innovator communities and kind of the next generation of entrepreneurs interested in agri-food. Can I point this to Don first, maybe?
Yeah, so thanks a lot for that question. So I think there are two parts to it, right? One is working with the existing farmers who may not be so tech savvy, and then the other one is about involving the young people in farming. So to begin, I would say that for us as a platform, ultimately we connect quite a lot of farmers, and a lot of these farmers are also our consumers. So on both sides, we need to make agriculture work for them. This also means that we work with a lot of farmers in general. So we actually have a program called Total Academy, where we provide training to farmers, existing farmers, to help them to operate better, or like do store operations, basic store operations, or even e-commerce solutions on our platform as well. And over the years, we have worked with officials and we worked with governments and agronomic institutes that work closely with the farmers on some of these. So we've trained over 490,000 of them, and this is on the downstream part. And I would say by helping them to sell better, they benefit from the efficiencies of the digital economy, which also helps to cut food loss and waste and emissions as well, as that I mentioned earlier. The other part of it that we actually do with them is actually Total Farms, where we have a cooperative that we run together with the support of the farmers. The farmers run the cooperative, we support them, and then the agronomic institutes and also like local governments get involved. And then that's a way for us to provide some capital, they provide some instructions, and then we get new technology that is better for the environment implemented together with the smallholder farmers in these situations. The final one is the piece on talking about the younger farmers, right? So of course it's important to help the farmers of today, and we also see the benefit of helping the farmers of tomorrow. So we also want more young people to get into farming so that farming remains sustainable, because we still need to eat, and if you still need to eat, you still need younger farmers to come in along the way. And we train them as well through our new farmer initiative, and we kind of support them in terms of helping them to benefit from store opening on our platform. The thing about new farmers is that a lot of them are younger, they are digital natives, and also quite a number of them are actually doing the reverse of the rural-urban migration problem, because a lot of them are in bigger cities, they actually want to go back home, and we actually make it easier for them to do so by providing them with training and then helping them with making good income, and then they also employ people around them in these roles as well. So I would say by them doing all of this, we actually make the food system more sustainable, more variable, and overall, we hope that with more of these people who are tech natives, it's easier for them to pick up technology that is, of course, also positive to profit and positive for the environment. Yeah.
Thanks, Don. Let me turn it over to Vikram, because I think you also have quite a lot of experience working with farmers of the demographic that the audience member who's asked the question has spoken about. And I'm sure you encounter issues around digital literacy in India as well.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for the audience member with very interesting question and pretty serious one. I would add, for example, in India, if you would talk to the current crop of farmers who perhaps the question is 60 plus, maybe it's not that high average farmer age in India, but it is above 50 for sure. There's a big chunk of it is above 50, and they would not want their next generation to be involved in farming. So it's not just that the next generation is tech savvy, yes, but their parents do not want their kids to come into farming because they see farming being not remunerative enough anymore. And India is maybe a little bit specific because we have a lot of small farmers. They keep on getting divided, big families. So it's a very serious issue. So on engaging the current crop of farmers who are not technically savvy, what works best in India till now, what I have seen, and with the partners we work with, is we have some kind of a service delivery mechanism. So we actually have local youth who are finding it kind of hard to come to the urban centers and find employment because that is also saturating. You can only have that many Uber drivers or the gig economy. So they are, interesting what Don said, there is a movement back to the rural area. So something similar is happening. So these local youth, they are trained, they are provided with the tools, they are tech savvy, who then on their turn are like service delivery or one-stop shop for the older farming generation. So that's how we bridge it at this point to reach out to the current crop of farmers. And then if you look at the future, a lot of these youth who are becoming these advisors or providing these services to the farmers in the village, they are becoming entrepreneurs themselves. So this is a much better, it gives a much better income, much better living standards, as opposed to being an Uber driver driving let's say, I have a very personal opinion on Uber drivers, so maybe that's mixing this a little bit, but it's in terms of employment, in terms of quality of employment, it does give the local rural youth an entrepreneurship route, and they become the ones who are the flag bearers of farming. And how this will sustain, I think in India, for example, we will go towards farm mechanization. There's obviously going to be a cut in the number of farmers who are active right now, as opposed to what would be the case in 10, 20 years from now and onwards. And you'll have much more informed farmers, a high level of farm automation. It's good they are getting involved now. So I think that's how we see from the sidelines how this whole track moves on. So those would be my observations on how we are engaging with farmers at this point.
Thanks, Vikram. I think that actually segues very nicely. I'd like to ask Etienne the same question, because I think what you're doing is also essentially tapping into this idea about rural development, about creating new opportunities, new pathways in rural spaces. And I'm curious how it's similar or different in Europe, and how your solution is enabling farmers in France to have access to a new source of income stream.
Yeah, that's indeed a really good question. My answer is going to converge with what Donna has said already. But what I observe in Europe and more especially in France, the problem is not access to technology. It's going to be training into regenerative agriculture means and education around those themes. Second problem will be interest as well, because after long hours in the field, it's going to be hard for a farmer to actually sit in front of his computer and get interested in calculating his carbon footprint, which is completely understandable. And the last bit would be around the data collection. That's definitely a key piece into calculating your carbon footprint. So it's not access to technology, it's more going to be the way to use them and the specific training into the field of regenerative agriculture. So the solution we found to this is actually farmers are not a separate entity that's working outside of an ecosystem, but working and equipping the entire ecosystem of people who have time and interest in training and who have interest in like providing this kind of advisory to the farmers. So what we're doing in France here is to actually deliver our solution through farming cooperatives, farm advisors, associations of farmers, wholesalers, chambers of agriculture. There are plenty of different players who are actually interested in getting involved, helping the farmers collect the data, understand what regenerative agriculture is, advise them, possibly bring them, I don't know, seeds or the different equipment or different supplies that they are needed to implement those plans. So thinking of farmers as being part of a network, of an ecosystem, is one way to actually solve this problem, this access to technologies.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's something we also see very much in Grow Asia's work, that the building of the ecosystem around farmers to support their adoption of whatever new technology it is, whether it's climate smart or not, is as equally important as the solution itself, in a way. It's an almost equally important part of the puzzle that has to come together. I'd like to give Julia the chance also to respond to this question about the next generation and innovation. And I think after that, I will invite you all to wrap up with a quick summary. But Julia, please.
Thank you. So first of all, very interesting thoughts. I kind of nodded the entire time about what I heard. So I would add another angle, which is not necessarily about regenerative agriculture, but rather because the question was also about digitization, the controlled environmental agriculture models. Because I do believe one of our projects, not with Transfood Mission, but with another venture, is actually going into that field. CEA could actually provide workplaces as well, and with vocational trainings, what organizations like Farm Tech Society is trying to build, we could provide workplaces for people in growing environments, which doesn't necessarily mean the traditional way of farming. So when we could have those growing systems, they could be also located in environments where we don't necessarily have the soil to grow and so on. With vocational trainings, we could actually have a completely new generation and also type of workforce entering the farming industry. So I think there are plenty of options in that sense, but as we kept saying, education, education, education. And if we don't have supportive policies in the same time, I don't think we will really accelerate that. So to highlight two of the obstacles we realize until now, one is the missing shared knowledge in the controlled environmental agriculture field. I feel the different players are trying to develop and research on their own because they think that's the only way how they can compete with each other. If they would go one step further and share the knowledge with each other, they could differentiate themselves with their portfolio, with other things. So that would be one. And once this shared knowledge is available, finally policymakers would have the standard to actually provide the right subsidies. So right now we don't even have the standard measurements for these farming systems to get any subsidies, right? So I think there is a lot more work to do in this environment, and especially thinking in ecosystems. I think that's very important because with one decision coming from policy, you have influence on other actors in the supply chain.
Thanks so much, Julia. So it's time for us to basically wrap up our panel. Thank you so much for this engaging discussion in your presentations. I'm just going to ask if all of our speakers can, one by one, basically in one sentence, summarize how the innovation in your particular company or organization contributes to a cleaner supply chain and why you think it's the key to unlocking food systems change. If you can try to summarize it in one sentence, and maybe we'll just go in the order of the presentations. So we'll start with Don, I think.
Yeah, so thanks a lot, Wei. Once again, I would say that the innovations that we have in terms of using digital technology to improve the supply chain and make it a lot more efficient is really what we need to think about at this stage. We hope that more partners can come in and think about some of these things which may be a lot more achievable, in addition to what the good work is being done in a lot of different parts of this. And then we can work together and then, of course, make sure that all farmers and consumers and basically all stakeholders benefit in the longer run as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Yunsil? I think you're still on mute.
I think SMEs, very fundamental companies in country, any other countries in any globally country. So it is a basic level of for decarbonization. So it is, I think it's very basic level of the government and globally level.
Thanks for bringing in the government perspective himself. And Vikram?
Yes, so I'll talk from an Indian context. So if you look at the entities that are most engaged with smallholder farmers are SMEs in India. These are the buyers, the processors, the warehousing, storage providers, etc. And we believe we are providing these guys the middle layer of SMEs that are working with producers with the tools which would improve their level of engagement with the producers and thus hopefully decarbonizing the entire supply chain. That's what we are playing, but of course we are open to more collaborations, learning more on different parts of the whole supply chain. How could we catalyze it?
Thanks, Vikram. Etienne?
So as a conclusion, as I've said earlier, nearly a quarter of greenhouse gases emissions worldwide can be related to the decisions that are taken at I would say 500 million farms in the world. So there are a lot of people, there are a lot of really small businesses that we need to engage in the transition. And to be able to engage them in the transition, we need to create an economic ecosystem that works and that is beneficial to them. And that's what we're aiming at doing.
Thank you. Julia, you have the last word.
No pressure. So basically, what I believe that after the past now 3 years, where our food system was hit by a pandemic and we have a war going on, I think the food industry stakeholders need to recognize that they need to stand on multiple legs and need to think outside of the box. And they don't have on their own the possibility to invest in their own infrastructure and do everything independently, and finally realize that they are part of an ecosystem. So once they know what kind of resources they have on hand, and this is where we and SMEs come into the picture to help them connect these resources and create further value and help them also become resilient, because I think resilience is one of the key goals for everyone along the supply chain.
Thanks so much, Julia. I think you've also done a great job of actually kind of wrapping up our whole conversation. Just to say to the audience that though the topic of ecosystem thinking and the importance of collaboration to support SMEs in their transition, it came out so clearly, I feel, in all of your different responses to the questions and in your presentations. And it's something that I didn't necessarily prompt you all to talk about beforehand, which is very encouraging because I think it just shows how important that is, and we'll definitely take that forward in terms of informing the policy brief that we'll be writing as using the discussions from this session as inputs. So I just want to thank you all very, very much for taking the time, participating, sharing your diverse views and experiences with the audience, and have a great rest of the day. Let me hand the floor back to Gina to summarize the conference for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Renee. Thank you so much, all the speakers. I think we had very interesting discussions, starting with the overview of what is happening regarding the agri-food and SMEs, with what we brought to the table with procuring a background document that is looking both at agri-food sector, decarbonization, what is happening so far, what are the trends, and specifically on SMEs. Then we have the opportunity to hear from different experts on enablers that are helping SMEs specifically to thrive, and what constitutes the good ecosystem and stakeholder engagement that is supporting not just startups, but also companies that are thriving towards technology innovation. And then we have continued on that note, looking specifically at the innovation-related trends in the agri-food and agriculture specifically, by having this excellent overview just now of different practices from our experts. And I just wanted to remind everybody that all the presentations will be available on our project page, the same as the recording on Whova, but all the materials further on will be shared with our audience. And we will continue our discussion tomorrow, looking specifically at the companies that will be sharing what they are doing, presenting both cases from Asia and Europe, and later on going deeper and diving deeper with what has happened today, and looking towards the future on ensuring our food chains and looking into challenges related with the resilience. Thank you so much, everybody, for staying with us, and we invite you warmly to join us tomorrow as well. And please stay posted also for what we do and for new exciting initiatives that will come as a result of this conference. Thank you so much, everybody.